What's up, story lovers? This is Pika Fiction. Get ready for today's incredible tale. What if Ash defeated Cynthia in the Masters 8 and she demanded a marriage contract as the winner's prize? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Your support helps us bring more amazing stories to you. Alright, let's dive right in. Chapter 1, The Covenant. The stadium shook. Not from an earthquake, not from some legendary Pokemon tearing through the sky, from 90,000 people screaming at once, their voices merging into a wall of sound that Ash Ketchum felt in his teeth. Across the shattered battlefield of Winden Stadium, Cynthia's Garchomp lay on its side, steam rising from its body. The dragon's chest heaved with labored breaths, its eyes glazed, and for a long moment the only movement on the entire field was the slow curl of dust settling over cracked earth. Pikachu stood 10 meters away, one knee buckled, electricity still arcing between the tips of his ears. Blood, his own, streaked down from a gash above his left eye where Garchomp's dragon claw had nearly ended everything 2 exchanges ago. The referee's flag went up. Garchomp is unable to battle. The winner of the Masters 8 semi-final, Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town. The sound hit like a physical thing. Ash's legs almost gave out, and he caught himself on the railing of the trainer's box, fingers white-knuckled. His heart was hammering so hard he could feel his pulse in his eyeballs. He'd done it. He looked at Pikachu, and Pikachu looked at him, and the little yellow mouse gave him that grin, the one that said, "Was there ever any doubt?" Before his legs finally buckled and he sat down hard on the broken ground. Ash vaulted the railing. He didn't walk. He ran. Slid the last few feet on his knees across the torn-up field and scooped Pikachu into his arms. Pikachu's body was hot to the touch, residual electricity making Ash's hair stand on end, and he didn't care. He held his partner against his chest and felt the rapid heartbeat against his own. "You were incredible," Ash said, his voice cracking in a way he'd deny later. "You were so incredible, buddy." Pikachu murmured, and pressed his face into Ash's jacket. Across the field, Cynthia recalled Garchomp. She held the Pokeball in both hands for a moment, her lips moving, saying something private, something just for them, and then clipped it to her belt. When she looked up, Ash expected to see devastation. Expected the gravity of what just happened to be written across her face. Instead, she was smiling. Not the composed, camera-ready smile she wore for interviews. Something raw and genuine that made her look 10 years younger. She walked toward him through the settling dust, her black coat stirring behind her, and the crowd noise seemed to dim, or maybe Ash just stopped hearing it. "Well," Cynthia said, stopping 3 paces away. "I suppose I should have expected this." "You almost had me," Ash said honestly. "That Dragon Rush, Scale Shot combo in the 4th exchange. I didn't see it coming. Almost doesn't count in a championship match." She extended her hand. "Congratulations, Ash. You earned every bit of this." He shook her hand. Her grip was firm and warm. The stadium erupted again, and confetti cannons fired from somewhere above, raining gold and silver streamers across the battlefield. The next 20 minutes were a blur. Medical staff rushed in for the Pokemon. Officials guided them to opposite ends of the field for post-match protocols. A swarm of cameras descended like bee drill on a honey tree. Ash answered questions on autopilot. Yes, he was thrilled. No, he hadn't been certain he'd win. Yes, Pikachu was getting the biggest bottle of ketchup in Winden tonight. Through the chaos, he kept catching glimpses of Cynthia across the field. She was speaking with officials too, but she seemed distracted. Her eyes kept drifting upward, past the stadium lights, toward the sky. And twice, Ash saw her check her phone with an expression that didn't match a trainer who'd just fought the battle of her life. She looked worried. Not about the loss. About something else entirely. The formal ceremony was scheduled for 30 minutes after the match, time enough to heal up, change clothes, and let the broadcast networks run their replays and commentary. Ash was ushered into a medical suite beneath the stadium where Nurse Joy's team worked on his Pokémon with quiet efficiency. Pikachu got the full treatment, wound seal on the gash, electrolyte replenishment, a full-body scan. He was asleep within minutes, curled on a heated pad, his tail twitching with whatever Pikachu dreamed about. Ash sat beside him and tried to process the fact that he'd just beaten Cynthia. Cynthia. The woman who'd wiped the floor with every trainer in Sinnoh for over a decade. The woman who'd dismantled Elite Four members like she was solving a mildly interesting puzzle. The woman whose Garchomp had been considered, by virtually every analyst alive, the single most dangerous non-legendary Pokémon in competitive battling. And he'd beaten her. With Pikachu. With the same Pikachu who'd lost to a starter Snivy once upon a time. He started laughing. Quietly at first, then louder, pressing his hands over his face. A passing nurse gave him a concerned look. "I'm fine," he said, still laughing. "I'm fine. I'm really fine." His phone was going berserk. Messages from everyone, his mom, Professor Oak, Brock, Misty, Dawn, Serena, Gary, half the trainers he'd ever battled. He scrolled through them with a grin that wouldn't stop, firing back quick responses. "Thanks. Yeah. I know. I can't believe it either." A knock on the door. One of the league officials, a severe-looking woman with a clipboard, poked her head in. "Mr. Ketchum, the ceremony begins in 10 minutes. We need you at stage left." "On my way." He checked on Pikachu one more time. Still sleeping. He'd bring him out for the ceremony if he woke up in time, but for now, rest was more important. Ash straightened his jacket, ran a hand through his hair, a futile gesture, as always, and headed for the tunnel. The ceremony stage had been erected at the center of the battlefield while the field itself was being repaired by a team of Macamp and Conkeldurr. A raised platform, 2 podiums, the Masters 8 banner stretched across the back. The crowd was still at full volume. They'd been entertained during the break by a replay montage set to music that made every exchange look even more dramatic than it had felt in the moment. Ash climbed the steps to the platform. Leon was already there, he'd be presenting as the reigning monarch, and he clapped Ash on the shoulder hard enough to stagger him. "Brilliant match, mate. Absolutely brilliant. That Thunderbolt into Irontail redirect? I've never seen anyone pull that off in a live battle." "Thanks, Leon. Honestly, I kind of made it up on the spot." Leon laughed. "That's what makes you terrifying." Cynthia arrived from the opposite side. She'd changed into a clean version of her signature black outfit, her hair freshly brushed, and she moved with the same fluid composure she always carried. But Ash noticed her eyes again, scanning the crowd, the officials, the cameras, with an alertness that went beyond post-match awareness. She was looking for something. Or waiting for the right moment. The MC, a veteran broadcaster with a voice like polished bronze, launched into his introductions. The crowd obliged with cheers at every name. The other Masters 8 participants were acknowledged in their VIP boxes, Diantha, elegant and applauding politely, Lance, arms crossed with a tight smile, Stephen, nodding with genuine respect, Iris, bouncing on her feet and waving. And now, the MC continued, as the victor of this historic semi-final, Ash Ketchum will advance to face Leon in the finals of the World Coronation Series Masters 8 tournament. The roar was enormous. Ash raised a hand, waving, feeling the heat of the lights and the weight of the moment pressing down on him like something physical. Before the formal declaration, tradition allows the defeated competitor to address the victor. "Champion Cynthia, the floor is yours." This was standard. The losing semi-finalist usually offered a few gracious words, praise for the opponent, reflections on the battle, maybe a joke to keep things light. Ash expected something along those lines. Cynthia stepped to the podium. She placed both hands on its edges. And for a moment, she was completely still, a held breath before the plunge. Then she spoke, and everything changed. I invoke the champion's covenant. Her voice was clear, amplified by the podium mic, and it carried across the stadium with the precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. The MC blinked. Leon's hand, still on Ash's shoulder, went rigid. Cynthia continued. Under Article 7 of the Sinnoh Ancestral Combat Code, ratified at the founding of the Pokémon League and never formally repealed, I, Cynthia Sharona, champion of the Sinnoh region, offer myself in marriage to the one who has defeated me in honorable combat. Silence. Not gradual silence. Not a murmur fading to quiet. Instantaneous, absolute silence, as if someone had pressed mute on 90,000 people simultaneously. Ash's brain stopped working. He heard the words. He understood them individually. Marriage. Covenant. Defeated me. But strung together, spoken in Cynthia's calm, unwavering voice in front of the largest live audience in Pokémon League history, they refused to assemble into anything that made sense. The covenant is binding upon invocation by the defeated party and acceptance by the victor, Cynthia continued, and now Ash could hear the faintest tremor beneath her composure, not uncertainty, but the strain of holding steady under immense pressure. It requires no approval from any governing body. It predates the modern league by 3 centuries. And it has never been formally struck from Sinnoh law. She turned to face him. Those gray eyes, the ones that had stared down legendary Pokémon, that had assessed battlefields with surgical precision, locked onto his with an intensity that made the stadium, the cameras, the 90,000 people vanish. Ash, she said, and it wasn't the champion speaking now. It was just her. I know how this sounds. I know what it looks like. But I need you to trust me. Everything depends on what happens next. The silence broke. Not into cheers or boos, but into a confused, building roar, people turning to each other, announcers talking over each other, officials scrambling. The MC was saying something about unprecedented situations and formal reviews. Leon had taken his hand off Ash's shoulder and was staring at Cynthia like she'd sprouted wings. In the VIP section, Ash could see reactions splitting in real time. Lance was on his feet, face unreadable. Diantha had her hand over her mouth. Steven was leaning forward, eyes narrowed with sharp interest. Iris looked like she was about to fall over the railing. And in a private box high above the stadium floor, behind tinted glass, a man in an immaculate charcoal suit set down his wine glass with deliberate calm and reached for his phone. Director Harlan Cross had watched a lot of unexpected things happen in his career managing the International League apparatus. This was the first one that made him genuinely angry. Ash looked at Cynthia. The noise was building around them like a wave, and any second now, officials would intervene, security would step in, and the moment would be swallowed by protocol and damage control. Why? He asked. Just the one word. Not hostile. Not confused. Direct. Not here, she said. Not with cameras. But I swear to you, this isn't a game, and it isn't what they'll say it is. I need you, Ash. The world needs what this covenant can do. He searched her face. He'd spent his entire life reading people and Pokémon, understanding what drove them, what they feared, what they were willing to fight for. It was the core of who he was, the reason Pokémon trusted him and rivals respected him. And right now, every instinct he had was telling him the same thing. She was afraid. Genuinely, deeply afraid, not of rejection, not of embarrassment, but of something so big it had driven her to do the most dramatic thing he'd ever seen in a public arena. Okay, he said. Not I accept. Not a formal response. Just okay, meaning I hear you, I believe you, and I'll follow this where it goes. Cynthia's composure cracked for exactly 1 second. Her eyes went bright, her jaw trembled, and she pressed her lips together hard. Then she rebuilt herself, and the champion was back. Thank you, she said quietly. The officials reached them then. A swarm of suits and earpieces, speaking rapidly about protocols and legal reviews and emergency sessions. The MC was trying to regain control of the broadcast. In the stands, 90,000 people were having 90,000 different opinions simultaneously and at maximum volume. Leon stepped between Ash and the first wave of officials with the ease of someone who'd been navigating public chaos his entire career. "Right, let's everyone take a breath, yeah." He spread his arms wide, cape billowing, and flashed the megawatt smile that had sold 1 billion posters. "I think what we all need is a bit of space to sort this out properly. Ash, Cynthia, go. I'll handle this lot." Ash shot him a grateful look. Leon winked. Cynthia was already moving, and Ash followed her off the platform, down the steps, past the Macamp repair crew, and into the tunnel beneath the stadium. The noise faded as they went deeper, the concrete walls absorbing sound until it was just their footsteps and the distant rumble of the crowd. She led him through corridors he hadn't known existed, past equipment storage, past locker rooms, through a service door that required a keycard she produced from somewhere in her coat. They emerged into a small, quiet room, some kind of official's lounge, with leather chairs and a water cooler and a window that looked out onto an interior courtyard. Cynthia closed the door. Locked it. Leaned against it. For the first time since the battle, she looked tired. "You have questions," she said. "About 100. Ash pulled out a chair, turned it around, and sat on it backward with his arms folded across the backrest. "Start with the biggest one. What's the Covenant actually do?" Cynthia moved to the window. Outside, the courtyard was empty, just trimmed hedges and a fountain that wasn't running. The Champions' Covenant is an ancient Sinnoh tradition. On the surface, it's exactly what it sounds like, a marriage bond between warriors, offered by the defeated to the victor. Historians treat it as a cultural curiosity. A relic. But it's not. No. She turned to face him. It's a mechanism. The marriage component is real, but it's the container, not the contents. What the Covenant actually does is bind two auras together, permanently, completely. Two people become one resonant system. Ash's eyes narrowed. Aura. Your aura, specifically. I've studied this for 2 years, Ash. The Covenant requires a specific kind of aura signature to function, one that can interface with legendary tier consciousness. In 5 centuries of records, there are exactly 3 people documented with that signature. She held up fingers. Sir Aaron of Rhoda. A woman named Sarah, who lived during the Sinnoh feudal period. And you. He sat with that for a moment. The Tree of Beginning. Lucario. The way legendaries had always seemed to find him, gravitate toward him, trust him when they trusted no one else. He'd never understood why. He'd just accepted it as part of his life, the way some people accepted being tall or left-handed. So the Covenant binds our auras, he said slowly. And then what? Then we become a bridge. Between humanity and the forces that hold reality together. Cynthia's voice dropped. The creation trio, Ash. Dialga, Palkia, Giratina. Something is happening to them. Something is destabilizing the dimensional boundaries they maintain. I've been tracking it for 2 years, seismic anomalies at ancient sites, energy fluctuations at the spear pillar, temporal and spatial microdistortions appearing across Sinnoh with increasing frequency. How bad? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled out her phone, swiped through several screens, and held it out to him. On the display was a satellite image of Sinnoh, overlaid with data points. Dozens of red markers clustered around Mount Coronet, with smaller clusters radiating outward like cracks in glass. Each of these is a recorded dimensional instability event in the last 6 months, she said. The frequency is doubling every 3 weeks. At the current rate, we have approximately 1 lunar cycle before the barriers between dimensions begin to physically break down. Ash studied the image. He wasn't a scientist, but he'd seen enough crises to recognize the shape of one. And the Covenant can stop it? The Covenant can allow us to communicate with the creation trio. To understand what's happening and help them stabilize. Without it, we're just humans. Standing outside the walls, unable to reach the gods who are holding the ceiling up. Ash set the phone down on the armrest. He looked at her steadily. Why me? And I don't mean the aura thing. I mean, why didn't you come to me privately? Why do it like that, in front of the whole world? The question landed, and Cynthia's expression shifted, a flicker of something that might have been guilt. Because the Covenant requires a specific invocation. Defeat in honorable combat, public declaration, acceptance by the victor. Those aren't ceremonial flourishes, they're the actual conditions that activate the aura binding. I couldn't do it privately. The mechanism doesn't work that way. And the Master's 8 was your way of making sure we fought. I didn't enter the tournament to win. I entered to find you on the bracket and lose to you. Ash blinked. Then he leaned back and let out a long breath. You threw the match. No. The word was sharp, immediate, and fierce enough that Ash believed it instantly. I fought you with everything I had. The Covenant requires honorable combat, if I'd held back, it wouldn't have worked. I needed to fight at my absolute best and lose to someone who was genuinely better. I entered the tournament hoping that person would be you. A pause. It was. Something settled in Ash's chest. Not pride, exactly, something quieter. The confirmation that the battle he'd just fought, the hardest battle of his life, had been real. That he'd earned it. Okay, he said again. What about the marriage part? You said it's the container. So, what does that actually mean for us? Cynthia's composure held, but color touched her cheeks, faint, quickly controlled. It means exactly what it sounds like. The Covenant is, in every legal and spiritual sense, a marriage. The aura binding doesn't function without the emotional commitment that marriage represents. It's not, you can't fake it. The bond requires genuine willingness from both parties. So if I'd said no out there, nothing would have happened. The Covenant can't compel. It can only invite. Ash nodded slowly. He stood up, walked to the water cooler, poured himself a cup, and drank it in one go. Then he poured another and handed it to her. She took it with a small, surprised blink. 2 more questions, he said. Ask. First, who's doing it? The destabilization. You said you've been tracking it. Dimensional barriers don't just start cracking on their own. Cynthia's expression darkened. I don't know yet. But the pattern suggests deliberate interference. Someone is targeting the ancient seal sites around Mount Coronet, the same sites that have maintained dimensional stability since the creation trio first shaped Sinnoh. It's methodical and it's accelerating. And second, who else knows about this? My grandmother, Carolina, who helped me research the Covenant's history. Professor Rowan, who's been monitoring the seismic data. And now you. She hesitated. There are things I haven't told you yet. Details about the Covenant's history, its costs. But I promise I will. All of it. Before we go any further. Ash looked at her for a long time. The fluorescent light of the lounge wasn't flattering, it washed out colors and cast harsh shadows, but Cynthia met his gaze without flinching, and he saw the same thing he'd seen on the stage, fear held in check by determination, and beneath both, an exhaustion that spoke of 2 years carrying something enormous alone. I'm going to need my Pokemon healed up, he said. And dinner. I haven't eaten since breakfast and I just fought the hardest battle of my life. Cynthia stared at him. Is that a yes? I already said okay. Okay isn't, Cynthia. He grinned. I've been running towards stuff like this since I was 10 years old. You think I'm going to hear, the world's in danger and you're one of the only people who can help and say no thanks, I'll pass. For the second time that night, her composure cracked. This time she didn't rebuild it immediately. She let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for months, pressed her hand over her eyes, and when she lowered it, she was smiling, not the champion's smile, but the real one. "You're exactly what I hoped you'd be," she said quietly. "Recklessly enthusiastic. Brave. There's a difference." They looked at each other, and the moment held, not romantic, not yet, but charged with something. The recognition of two people who'd just stepped off a cliff together and hadn't hit the ground yet. A heavy knock on the door shattered it. "Champion Cynthia. Mr. Ketchum. This is League official Hendricks. I need you both to come with me immediately. Director Cross has convened an emergency session of the governing board." Cynthia's expression reset to champion mode so fast it was almost scary. She straightened her coat, lifted her chin, and unlocked the door. Hendricks was a large man with no neck and the permanently stressed expression of someone whose job description included the phrase "handle unexpected situations." He was flanked by two League security officers who looked like they wished they were anywhere else. "Director Cross doesn't have authority to summon a sitting regional champion," Cynthia said, her voice silk over steel. "He's not summoning you, ma'am. He's requesting. Urgently. And if I decline his urgent request?" Hendricks swallowed visibly. "He said to tell you, and I'm quoting, if she wants to play with antique laws, she should be prepared to defend them in front of the people who write the current ones." Cynthia's smile was thin and cold. "How charming. Tell the director I'll be available in 1 hour. I have a prior engagement." "Ma'am, 1 hour, Mr. Hendricks." She walked past him. Ash followed, falling into step beside her with an ease that felt natural, like they'd been walking side by side for years instead of minutes. "Prior engagement," he murmured as they moved down the corridor. "You said you needed dinner." Ash laughed. It echoed off the concrete walls, and one of the trailing security officers almost smiled before catching himself. They didn't make it to dinner. Not immediately, anyway. The corridor opened into the stadium's main concourse, and the moment they appeared, it was like dropping raw meat into a pool of Sharpedo. Press, fans, league staff, broadcast crews, everyone who'd been milling in confused anticipation for the last 30 minutes locked onto them simultaneously. The questions came in a wall of noise. "Ash. Is it true you've accepted a marriage proposal? Cynthia, can you explain the legal basis for the Champions Covenant? Is this a publicity stunt? Are you two in a relationship? How long has this been planned?" Cynthia didn't slow down. She moved through the crowd like a ship through rough seas, steady, unhurried, completely unbothered, and people parted for her without quite understanding why. Ash stayed at her shoulder, and Pikachu, who had apparently woken up and escaped the medical suite, because he was suddenly there, on Ash's shoulder like he'd never left, bristled his fur with just enough static to discourage anyone from getting too close. They made it through a side exit and into the cool wind and night. The city gleamed around them, towers of glass and steel, the distant hum of traffic, the massive screens on nearby buildings already replaying the Covenant Declaration on loop. A car was waiting. Black, nondescript, driven by someone Ash didn't recognize. Cynthia opened the rear door and gestured him in. "My hotel," she said. "Private dining room. We can talk properly there." Ash climbed in. Pikachu settled on his lap, and Cynthia slid in beside them. The door closed, and the noise of the world cut off like a switch. In the sudden quiet, Ash became aware of how close they were. The back seat was spacious, but Cynthia's presence filled it, not physically, but energetically. She carried herself with a gravity that made spaces feel smaller, and up close, he noticed things the cameras never captured. A faint scar along her left jawline. The way she absently twisted a silver ring on her right hand. The slight darkening under her eyes that spoke of too many late nights. She caught him looking and raised an eyebrow. "Sorry," he said. "Just processing. Take your time. Though I'd prefer you process before the governing board tries to have us both arrested." Can they do that? No. But Cross will want us to think they can. The car wound through Wyndon's illuminated streets. On one of the building-sized screens they passed, Ash saw his own face, the moment after the battle, holding Pikachu, looking like a man who'd just been told the sky was green and was trying to decide if he believed it. "That's going to be everywhere by morning," he said. "It's already everywhere. My phone has received 412 messages since the declaration. I stopped counting. Popular. Notorious. There's a difference." They shared a look, and something flickered between them, not the charged weight from before, but something lighter. The beginning of a rhythm. The way two people start to figure out how they fit together. The hotel was one of Wyndon's finest, a tower of Art Deco elegance near the river, the kind of place that had doormen in white gloves and lobby floors you could see your reflection in. Cynthia clearly had arrangements here because they bypassed everything: front desk, concierge, the cluster of photographers camped outside, and entered through a service entrance that led to a private elevator. The dining room was on the 32nd floor. Small, intimate, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Wyndon skyline. A table was already set for two, with covered dishes that suggested someone had called ahead. The food was simple and excellent: grilled fish, rice, vegetables, nothing fussy. Ash fell on it like a starving man. Pikachu got his own plate, smaller, heavy on the berries, and ate with equal enthusiasm. Cynthia watched them both with an expression that was half amusement, half something softer. "When's the last time you ate?" she asked. "Breakfast. 8 hours ago. I can't eat before big matches. Nerves. You didn't seem nervous out there." "I hide it well." He took a long drink of water. "Okay. You said there were things you haven't told me yet." "Costs." "Hit me." Cynthia set down her fork. The amusement faded. The Covenant has been invoked twice in recorded history. The first time was a minor feudal dispute, two clan leaders, no legendary involvement. It functioned as a simple political marriage with mild aura enhancement. Nothing dramatic. And the second time? 500 years ago. A Sinnoh champion named Aldrich and his partner, Sarah. The circumstances were remarkably similar to what we're facing: dimensional instability, the creation trio in distress, reality fracturing at the seams. Aldrich and Sarah completed the Covenant and used their combined resonance to interface with the creation trio and stabilize the boundaries. It worked. It worked. Cynthia paused. Sarah died. The words hung in the air. Ash stopped chewing. The strain of interfacing with three legendary consciousnesses simultaneously was more than her body could handle, Cynthia said, her voice carefully controlled. The Covenant shares life force between the bonded pair. When Sarah's body failed, Aldrich was pulled to the edge of death with her. He survived, but she didn't. Ash swallowed his food slowly. And Aldrich? Vanished. Historical records say he walked into Mount Coronet after Sarah's death and never came out. Most historians assume he died of grief in the caves. My grandmother believes he fell into the distortion world. You're telling me there's a real chance this kills one of us? I'm telling you there's a historical precedent for it. And you were going to mention this when? Now. Tonight. Before anything else happens. Her eyes met his, unflinching. I told you I would tell you everything, and I am. The Covenant's risks are real. I won't pretend otherwise. Ash leaned back in his chair. Pikachu had stopped eating and was watching the conversation with ears pricked, gaze flicking between them. You're asking me to sign up for something that might kill me, Ash said. Not angry. Measuring. I'm asking you to help me save the world, knowing that the tool we'd use to do it has killed someone before. Yes. And you'd be taking the same risk. Identical. The Covenant doesn't protect either party more than the other. He drummed his fingers on the table. Thinking. Not panicking, Cynthia noticed that. She'd braced for panic, or anger, or the kind of noble self-sacrifice that masked fear. Instead, she got Ash Ketchum doing what he always did, assessing the situation and deciding what to do about it. 500 years ago, he said. Different people, different Pokemon, different understanding of aura. No modern technology, no modern medicine, no network of champions who could back them up. That's true. So maybe the reason Sarah died wasn't that the Covenant is inherently lethal. Maybe it's that they didn't have enough support. 2 people against 3 gods with no safety net. Cynthia blinked. It was the first time all evening she'd looked genuinely surprised. That's, actually a theory my grandmother proposed. She believes the Covenant's danger scales inversely with the support system around the bonded pair. So we build a better support system. Ash grinned, and it was the same grin he wore on the battlefield, reckless, certain, alive. I know a few champions. Cynthia stared at him. Then she exhaled a laugh, short, disbelieving, edged with something that might have been relief so intense it hurt. You're insane, she said. Probably. Is that a problem? It might be the only reason any of this works. They finished dinner. The conversation shifted to logistics, when they'd need to travel to Sinnoh, what the Covenant's completion ceremony required, who they could trust. Ash asked sharp questions and retained the answers, and Cynthia found herself recalibrating her mental model of him with every exchange. He wasn't the impulsive child she'd met in Sinnoh years ago. He'd grown into something she hadn't fully anticipated. Someone who listened. Who processed quickly. Who made decisions not from ignorance but from a genuine, bone-deep willingness to face whatever came. It was past midnight when Ash's phone buzzed with a message from Leon. Cross is furious. Postpone the board meeting to tomorrow morning. Wants both of you there. I told him I'd pass it along but made no promises. Also, nice work today, champion. You're going to be brilliant in the finals. If we get there. Ash showed it to Cynthia. She read it, lips quirking. Leon's more politically savvy than people give him credit for, she said. He's telling us Cross will use tomorrow to prepare his position. We should do the same. What's Cross's deal, exactly? Harlan Cross is the director of the Pokemon League International Governing Board. Think of him as the CEO of the league's business side. He doesn't control champions directly, but he controls funding, broadcast rights, sponsorship agreements, and the legal framework that governs competitive battling across all regions. He's spent 15 years building a system where champions are the league's most valuable public assets, carefully managed, carefully marketed, carefully controlled. And 2 of those assets just went off script in the biggest possible way. Exactly. To Cross, the Covenant isn't a mystical bond or a response to a dimensional crisis. It's a branding nightmare and a power grab by a regional champion acting outside league oversight. Is he dangerous? Cynthia considered. He's not evil. He genuinely believes the league's institutional stability is what keeps the Pokemon world functioning. And he's not entirely wrong, the league does provide structure, regulation, safety standards. But he's rigid. He sees threats to the system as threats to the world, and he responds accordingly. So he'll try to stop us. He'll try to delay us, discredit us, and ultimately bring us to heel using legal and political pressure. He won't use force, that's not his style. But he has resources, influence, and a media apparatus that can shape public perception faster than we can. Ash stood and stretched. His body was starting to remind him that he'd fought an extremely intense Pokemon battle several hours ago and hadn't slept since 5 in the morning. Then we don't give him time to build momentum, Ash said. We go public with the acceptance tomorrow. Full press conference. Beat him to the narrative. Cynthia raised both eyebrows. That's surprisingly media savvy for someone who once told a reporter that his battle strategy was vibes. I've grown. Evidently. They stood facing each other in the quiet dining room, the wind skyline glittering behind the glass. The surreality of the situation settled over Ash like a second skin. 12 hours ago he'd been stretching in a locker room, mentally preparing for the biggest battle of his career. Now he was engaged. To Cynthia. The Sinnoh champion. And somehow the engagement was the least dramatic part of his evening. "I should sleep," he said. "Big day tomorrow. Press conference, political maneuvering, possibly saving the world. Your room is on this floor. I arranged it when I booked the hotel. You were that sure I'd say yes. I was that sure you'd need a place to sleep either way." He laughed. She walked him to the door. "Ash." He turned. Cynthia stood in the doorway, backlit by the soft glow of the dining room. For a moment, the champion was gone again, and it was just her, a woman who'd gambled everything on a single moment and was still processing the fact that it had worked. "Thank you," she said. "For trusting me. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen me before coffee." She smiled. "The real one. Good night, Ash." "Good night, Cynthia." Pikachu, half asleep on Ash's shoulder, raised a paw in a lazy wave. Cynthia's smile widened, and the door closed between them. Ash found his room, spacious, comfortable, with a bed that looked like a cloud with ambitions, and collapsed onto it without changing clothes. Pikachu curled up on the pillow beside him. He stared at the ceiling. What did I just agree to? But the question didn't carry the weight of doubt. It carried the electric charge of a new adventure, the same feeling he'd had at 10 years old, walking out of Pallet Town with a disobedient Pikachu and no idea what was coming. He fell asleep smiling. Somewhere far away, deep inside the hollow mountain that was the heart of Sinnoh, a man who should have been dead 5 centuries ago watched the same broadcast that 90 million people around the world were watching. The chamber was carved from the mountain's living rock, lit by crystals that pulsed with a light that didn't exist in the normal spectrum. The air tasted of static and old stone. Equipment lined the walls, not modern technology, exactly, but not ancient either. Something in between. Machines built from principles that the modern world had forgotten, powered by energy siphoned from the dimensional boundaries themselves. The broadcast played on a screen that shouldn't have worked this deep underground, fed by signals that traveled through channels no satellite could reach. On screen, Cynthia Sharona spoke the words of the Covenant, and a young man with a Pikachu on his shoulder said okay with the casual certainty of someone who'd never learned to be afraid of the right things. She's accelerating the timeline. The speaker stood in the chamber's entrance, a tall figure in a dark coat, pale hair catching the crystal light. Tobias. His expression was neutral, but his eyes tracked the broadcast with sharp attention. From the shadows deeper in the chamber, a voice answered. It was quiet, rough-edged, carrying the weight of years beyond counting. Let her. Aldrich stepped into the light. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with features that might have been handsome once but had been weathered into something harder. His eyes were the wrong color, not any natural shade, but a shifting, iridescent gray-violet that caught light from angles that didn't exist. A mark of the distortion world, burned into him by centuries of exposure. He watched the screen. Watched the young man's face. The Covenant changes nothing, Aldrich said. It's a key. And keys open doors in both directions. Tobias inclined his head. The seal sights. Continue the schedule. For more by the new moon. The eastern ridge, Solation, Celestic, and the pillar's base. Celestic is her grandmother's territory. Security will be higher. Then be better than their security. Aldrich's eyes never left the screen. On it, Ash Ketchum was being led through a crowd, Pikachu sparking on his shoulder, and even through the compression of a digital broadcast, something about him radiated, a presence, an energy, a light that cameras caught but couldn't explain. Aldrich's jaw tightened. He has her aura, he said softly. Sarah's frequency. I can see it even through a screen. Is that a problem? It's the reason I've waited 500 years. Aldrich turned from the screen. His shadow, cast by the crystallite, stretched wrong, too long, too dark, bending at angles the chamber's geometry didn't support. The covenant will give them power. And power, properly redirected, can kill gods. He walked deeper into the mountain. Tobias watched him go, then looked at the screen one final time. On it, the replay showed the moment of Ash's victory, Pikachu standing over Garchomp, battered and brilliant, refusing to fall. Tobias's expression didn't change. But his hand, resting at his side, curled into a fist. He followed Aldrich into the dark. Morning hit Wyndon like a spotlight. Ash woke to Pikachu patting his face, sunlight blazing through windows he'd forgotten to curtain, and his phone showing 247 unread messages. He ignored the messages, showered, dressed in clean clothes he found neatly folded on the room's dresser. Someone on Cynthia's staff was efficient, and went looking for coffee with the single-minded determination of a man who'd fought a champion and gotten engaged in the same evening. He found Cynthia in the private dining room, already dressed, already caffeinated, and already on the phone. She held up a finger, one moment, and continued a conversation in rapid Sinnoh that Ash couldn't follow but could tell was heated. He poured himself coffee. Black, strong enough to strip paint. Pikachu got orange juice and immediately dunked his face in it. Cynthia ended the call with a clipped phrase and set the phone down. "My grandmother," she said. "She's been fielding calls from every media outlet in Sinnoh since last night. She's enjoying it far too much. Good morning to you too." "Good morning." She pushed a tablet across the table. "You should see this." The tablet showed a news aggregator. Every headline was about them. Ash Ketchum accepts ancient marriage covenant. Sinnoh champion invokes 500-year-old law. Masters 8 rocked by unprecedented declaration. And beneath the headlines, the takes. Op-eds, reaction pieces, social media trending topics. The discourse had already fractured into factions. Supporters, mostly in Sinnoh, where the covenant had cultural resonance, calling it romantic, historic, beautiful. Critics, mostly league-aligned, calling it a stunt, legally baseless, potentially coercive. And the conspiracy theorists, who were having the time of their lives. "Public opinion is split roughly 60-40 in our favor," Cynthia said. "Better than I expected, but fragile. Cross will start pushing back today." "What's his first move?" "The governing board meeting. He's convened it for 10 o'clock. He'll try to get a formal resolution declaring the covenant invalid under international league law." "Can he?" "He has the votes. Most board members are his appointees. But a resolution without enforcement is just words, and enforcement requires cooperation from regional authorities. As Sinnoh champion, I have sovereign authority over all matters of Sinnoh cultural law within my jurisdiction. So it's a standoff. For now. But Cross is patient, and he has leverage, sponsorship contracts, broadcast deals, funding for regional leagues. He can apply pressure without ever making an official move." Ash sipped his coffee. "Then let's not play defense." Press conference. Today. Before the board meeting. Cynthia studied him. "What would you say?" "The truth. Or as much of it as we can. The covenant is real, it's legal under Sinnoh law, and we're going through with it. We don't have to explain the dimensional crisis publicly, not yet. But we frame it as our choice, made freely, and dare Cross to argue against two consenting adults exercising a legitimate legal tradition. That's, actually very good. You keep sounding surprised. I keep having to revise my expectations upward." They shared a look across the table. The morning light caught Cynthia's hair, turning the gold almost white, and Ash felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with coffee. He looked away first, which he'd deny later. "Press conference at 9, he said. "Where?" "The hotel has a conference room. I'll arrange it." They had 45 minutes. Ash used them to call the people who mattered. His mom first. Delia Ketchum answered on the second ring, and her voice was a mixture of joy, confusion, and the particular brand of maternal concern that could make a grown man feel 10 years old. Ash Ketchum, you tell me right now, are you happy? Mom, not what's happening. Not the politics. Not the world saving. Are you happy? He thought about it honestly. About the battle, the declaration, the conversation in the quiet room, the way Cynthia looked when her composure cracked and the real person showed through. Yeah, he said. I think I am. Then that's all I need to know. But you are bringing her to Pallet Town for dinner, young man. That is non-negotiable. Yes, Mom. Brock next. Brock was already way ahead of him. He'd been researching the Champions Covenant since the moment it was declared, because of course he had. It's legitimate, Ash. I cross-referenced it with 3 different sources on Sinnoh historical law. The invocation procedure she followed was textbook perfect. If Cross tries to invalidate it, he'll need to get Sinnoh's parliament to formally repeal the statute, which would take months and would be political suicide in a region that takes its traditions seriously. Thanks, Brock. How are you taking the whole, me getting engaged thing? A pause. Ash, I have been trying to convince beautiful women to marry me for 15 years with 0 success. You defeat one in a Pokemon battle and she proposes on live television. I'm processing complex emotions. Sorry. Don't be sorry. Be happy. And for the love of Arceus, don't screw this up. Misty was harder. She was happy for him, genuinely, he could tell, but there was something else underneath, something she'd never fully said and probably never would. They talked for 10 minutes, and when they hung up, Ash sat with the phone in his hands for a moment, feeling the weight of roads not taken. Then he straightened up, because there was a press conference to run. The hotel conference room was standing room only. Every major network, every sports outlet, every entertainment journalist who could get to Wyndon overnight had packed themselves into a room designed for 50 people. The air was hot and electric with anticipation. Ash and Cynthia entered together. Not holding hands, not performing couplehood, but side by side with the kind of unified presence that made the room go quiet before they'd said a word. Pikachu sat on Ash's shoulder, freshly groomed, the wound over his eye now a small, clean scar that somehow made him look even more battle-hardened. He surveyed the press corps with the calm disdain of a Pokemon who defeated gods and wasn't impressed by camera flashes. Cynthia spoke first. Formal, precise, authoritative. She explained the Champions Covenant, its history, its legal standing, its requirements. She cited the relevant statutes by number. She was, Ash realized, building a fortress out of words, brick by brick, making the legal case so airtight that any challenge would have to be structural, not procedural. Then it was his turn. Ash had never been good at prepared statements. He was good at talking to people. Look, he said, leaning into the microphone with the casual confidence that had always been his secret weapon, I know this is weird. Believe me, nobody's more surprised than I am. Yesterday morning I was worried about whether Pikachu's Thunderbolt timing was sharp enough for the match. Now I'm apparently engaged. Laughter from the press. Real laughter, not polite. But here's the thing. I've spent my entire life following my gut. My gut told me to pick Pikachu when I was 10, and that worked out pretty well. He scratched Pikachu behind the ear, and Pikachu leaned into it. My gut told me to enter the Masters 8, and yesterday I defeated one of the greatest trainers who's ever lived. And when Cynthia made her declaration, my gut told me she wasn't playing games. She was telling the truth about something important. He paused. Let the cameras click. So yeah. I accepted. Not because of tradition, not because of law, and not because anyone told me to. I accepted because I trust her. And because whatever comes next, I'd rather face it with her than without her. The room erupted with questions. They fielded them together, Cynthia handling the legal and procedural ones, Ash handling the personal ones, tag-teaming with a coordination that surprised both of them. 20 minutes in, a reporter from the Winden Herald asked the question everyone was thinking. Ash, are you in love with Cynthia? The room went silent. Cameras focused. Cynthia's expression didn't change, but Ash saw her hand tighten on the podium. He thought about lying. About a politic non-answer. About the safe route. Instead, he said, I don't know yet. But I know I respect her more than almost anyone I've ever met. I know she's brilliant and brave and she scares me a little bit, which is honestly kind of great. And I know that love isn't something you decide, it's something you build. So ask me again in a year. The room held its breath. Then someone started clapping, one of the Sinnoh reporters, grinning ear to ear, and it spread. Cynthia's hand relaxed on the podium. She didn't look at him, but the corner of her mouth twitched. They wrapped the press conference shortly after. As they exited through the back, Cynthia fell into step beside him and said quietly, that answer about love. Was that rehearsed? Nothing I say is ever rehearsed. That's either my greatest strength or my biggest problem. It was perfect. See? Strength. The governing board meeting happened at 10, as scheduled, in the league's Winden headquarters, a glass and steel monument to institutional authority. Ash and Cynthia attended, but they attended on their terms, arriving together, sitting together, presenting a unified front to a room designed to divide and conquer. Director Harlan Cross sat at the head of the table. He was in his mid-50s, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the kind of face that looked trustworthy on camera and calculating in person. His eyes were sharp and patient, and he looked at Ash and Cynthia the way a chess player looks at an unexpected opening. Thank you both for coming, he said, and his voice was warm enough to be convincing if you weren't paying attention. I want to be clear, this isn't a tribunal. This is a conversation between colleagues about an unusual situation. Of course, Cynthia said, matching his warmth perfectly. Two professionals who understood exactly what the other was doing. Cross laid out his position with surgical precision. The covenant, he argued, was a regional tradition with no standing in international law. The Masters 8 was a league-sanctioned event under international jurisdiction. By invoking the covenant during a league event, Cynthia had created a legal conflict that could undermine the tournament's legitimacy and, by extension, the league's authority. I'm not questioning your sincerity, he said, and to his credit, he almost sounded like he meant it. I'm questioning the venue. If you wanted to invoke a Sinnoh tradition, the appropriate context would have been a Sinnoh league event, under Sinnoh jurisdiction. The covenant requires defeat in combat, Cynthia replied. Ash and I were not scheduled to battle in any Sinnoh league event. The Masters 8 was the only arena where we would face each other. Then perhaps the covenant's requirements are incompatible with the modern competitive framework. Perhaps the modern competitive framework should be flexible enough to accommodate the traditions it was built on. It went back and forth like that for an hour. Cross was good, better than good. He never attacked directly, never raised his voice, never made demands. He suggested. He proposed. He raised concerns. And each suggestion, proposal, and concern was a small, precise nudge toward the same conclusion: delay, review, compliance. Ash watched and learned. He'd never been interested in politics, but watching Cynthia and Cross was like watching a high-level Pokemon battle with words instead of moves. Every statement was a positioning. Every response was a counter. When Cross finally turned to him, Ash, what are your thoughts? Ash kept it simple. I think you're worried about losing control. And I get that, control is your job. But this isn't something you can control. Cynthia and I made a choice, and we made it freely, and no board resolution is going to change that. So the question isn't whether you approve. The question is whether you want to spend the next few weeks fighting us in public and looking like the guy who tried to stop a love story, or whether you want to work with us and look like the guy who supported champions making champions better. Cross looked at him for a long time. The room was very quiet. "You're more politically astute than your reputation suggests, Mr. Ketchum." "I keep hearing that today." Cross didn't smile. But something shifted behind his eyes, a recalculation, a recognition that this wasn't going to be as easy as he'd planned. "I'll take your proposal under advisement," he said. "In the meantime, I'm suspending the Masters 8 tournament pending a full review of the semi-final circumstances." "You can't do that," Cynthia said immediately. "The tournament is governed by League International rules, which grant the director emergency suspension authority in cases of disputed match integrity. Article 12, Section C." Cross stood. "I'm not blocking your covenant. I'm ensuring the tournament it occurred in is properly administered. I trust you can appreciate the distinction." He left the room. His aides followed. The door closed. Cynthia's composure lasted exactly 3 seconds after it shut. "That man," she said through gritted teeth, "is going to be a problem. He just suspended the tournament. He suspended your path to the finals. Which means he suspended your momentum, your public visibility, and Leon's ability to support you openly as the sitting monarch. It's a precision strike disguised as procedure." Ash leaned back in his chair and laced his fingers behind his head. "So we leave," he said. "What?" "We leave Winden. Go to Sinnoh. Start working on the actual problem. Cross wants to fight on his turf with his rules. So we don't play. We go to yours." Cynthia stared at him. Then, slowly, the tension drained from her shoulders. "When did you get strategic?" "I've always been strategic. I just apply it to things that matter." She almost smiled. "We should leave tonight. Before Cross can put additional pressure on the Galarian authorities to limit our movement. Tonight works. I'll arrange transport." They left the League building through a back entrance, avoiding the press that had gathered at the front. The afternoon sun was warm on Ash's face, and Winden's familiar streets felt different now, charged with the knowledge that he was leaving, that the next time he stood on solid ground it would be in Sinnoh, and everything after that was unknown. Pikachu nuzzled against his neck. "Yeah, buddy," Ash murmured. "Here we go again." They returned to the hotel. There were arrangements to make: travel, communication with allies, securing Ash's other Pokémon from the medical center. Cynthia disappeared into a flurry of phone calls, speaking in alternating Sinnohan and Standard, her voice shifting between diplomatic warmth and steel-edged authority depending on who she was talking to. Ash handled his own calls. Professor Oak agreed to transfer his reserve team to whatever Pokémon Center they reached in Sinnoh. Brock offered to meet them in Celestic Town. He had contacts at the Sinnoh Archaeological Institute who might have information on the seal sites. Dawn, who lived in Sinnoh, immediately volunteered to help and had to be gently told that this was potentially very dangerous, at which point she volunteered louder. Leon sent a text: "Cross suspended the tournament." "I know. Don't worry about it. Go do what you need to do. I'll keep things steady here. And Ash, when this is over, I still want that finals match. Don't you dare skip out on me." Ash replied, "Wouldn't dream of it." By evening, they were ready. A private aircraft, arranged through Cynthia's personal network, not League channels, was waiting at a small airfield outside the city. As they drove through the wind and dusk, Ash watched the city lights blur past and felt the strange, weightless sensation of a life pivoting on its axis. "What are you thinking?" Cynthia asked from beside him. "That I woke up this morning as a Pokémon trainer trying to become world champion. And now I'm flying to Sinnoh to complete an ancient marriage ritual and save the world from dimensional collapse. Is that a complaint? It's an observation." He grinned. "I've had weirder Tuesdays. It's Thursday. See, I don't even know what day it is. That's how wild this is." She laughed. A real laugh, surprised out of her, and Ash felt that warmth in his chest again, the quiet, growing certainty that whatever else was happening, whatever dangers were coming, this partnership was going to be something worth having. The airfield was small and dark, just a single runway cutting through the English countryside outside Windon. The aircraft was a sleek twin-engine jet, compact enough for private travel, fast enough to reach Sinnoh by dawn. As they walked across the tarmac, Pikachu's ears swiveled suddenly. He sat up straight on Ash's shoulder, cheeks sparking. Ash stopped. "What is it?" Cynthia had noticed too. She was scanning the airfield's perimeter, one hand drifting toward her belt. A figure stepped out of the shadow of the hangar. Tall, lean, wearing a League uniform with the rank insignia of a senior enforcement officer. Behind him, 4 more officers emerged, each with a pokeball in hand. "Mr. Ketchum. Champion Cynthia." The lead officer's voice was polite and completely inflexible. "Director Cross has issued a travel advisory for all Masters 8 participants. No competitor may leave Galar until the tournament review is complete." Cynthia stepped forward. Her voice was ice. "A travel advisory is a recommendation, not a restriction. And you have no jurisdiction over a Sinnoh national champion. Our orders cover Mr. Ketchum specifically, ma'am. As a Masters 8 competitor under active review." Ash felt the shift in the air. Pikachu's cheeks crackled louder. Behind the officers, the 4 pokeballs caught the runway lights. Each one held a Pokémon ready to enforce Cross's advisory if words weren't enough. This was the moment. Comply, and Cross would bury them in bureaucratic quicksand. Fight, and they'd be branded as criminals. Ash made his choice. He walked forward. Not aggressively, calmly, steadily, with the easy confidence of someone who'd stared down legends and hadn't blinked. He stopped 2 paces from the lead officer and looked him in the eye. "What's your name?" Ash asked. The officer blinked. "Officer Rains." "Officer Rains, I'm going to get on that plane. Not because I don't respect the League, but because there's something more important happening than a tournament, and every hour I spend here is an hour wasted." He paused. "I'm not going to battle you. I'm not going to make a scene. I'm just going to walk to that plane and get on it. And you can report to Director Cross that I left voluntarily, of my own free will, and that you couldn't stop me without using force against the winner of the Masters 8 semi-final in front of a champion of the Sinnoh region." He let that sink in. "If you use force," Ash continued quietly, "it'll be on every camera phone within half a mile by morning. League enforcement officers physically restraining the people's favorite trainer. How do you think that plays?" Rains's jaw worked. His officers shifted behind him. The silence stretched. Then Rains stepped aside. "I'll file my report," he said stiffly. "Thank you, Officer Rains. Have a good night." Ash walked past him. Cynthia followed, and he could feel her gaze on the back of his head, surprised, reassessing, adjusting her model of him upward once more. They boarded the plane. The door sealed. The engine spooled up. Through the window, Ash watched Officer Rains and his team standing on the tarmac, silhouettes against the hangar lights, watching them leave. As the plane lifted off and Windon fell away beneath them, Cynthia sat down across from him and shook her head slowly. "That was either incredibly brave or incredibly reckless," she said. "Why does everyone keep making me choose between those?" The plane banked east, climbing into the night sky. Below, Galar's light spread like a glittering carpet, fading as they gained altitude. Ahead, the sky was dark and star-filled, and somewhere beyond the curve of the world, Sinnoh waited. Ash leaned his forehead against the cool window. His reflection looked back at him, tired, wired, alive in a way he hadn't felt since the first time he left home. "Ash," Cynthia said. He turned. She was looking out her own window, but her gaze was fixed on something specific. A point on the distant horizon where the stars seemed wrong, too bright in some places, too dim in others, as if the sky itself was flickering. "Do you see that?" she asked. He looked. At first, nothing. Just sky and stars. Then, there. A shimmer, like heat haze, but vertical. A crack in the darkness, so faint it might have been his imagination. Except it wasn't, because Pikachu saw it too, ears flattening, a low sound building in his throat. That's Sinnoh's airspace, Cynthia said quietly. The distortions are visible from here now. They weren't a week ago. The crack pulsed. For a split second, the stars behind it shifted, rearranging into a pattern that didn't belong to this sky, this dimension, this reality, and then snapped back. Ash's skin prickled. Not with fear. With recognition. He'd felt this before. At the Tree of Beginning. At Alamos Town. At the spear pillar itself, when Dialga and Palkia had torn the sky apart and he'd stood in the gap. The world was breaking. And he was flying toward the crack. That's why, Cynthia said softly, watching his face. Ash nodded. He reached across the aisle and, without thinking about it, took her hand. She flinched, not away, but in surprise, and then her fingers closed around his. Her grip was strong and warm and slightly trembling. Then we'd better get moving, Ash said. The plane flew east, into the dark, toward the shattered sky over Sinnoh. Behind them, Winden glittered and shrank. Ahead, the horizon flickered with light that didn't belong to any star. And deep inside Mount Coronet, Aldrich placed his hand on the ancient stone and felt the Covenant's first stirring, a resonance he hadn't felt in 500 years, a key turning in a lock he'd spent centuries preparing to open. Begin, he said. In the tunnels around him, the pillars moved. Chapter 2, The Fracture. They landed in Sinnoh at dawn. The airfield was a private strip outside Jubilife City, tucked between farmland and forest, the kind of place that didn't appear on commercial flight maps. Cynthia had arranged it through channels that existed outside the League's reach, old money, old families, the kind of Sinnoh aristocracy that remembered when champions were warlords and treated the modern League like an adorable experiment. Ash stepped off the plane into cold air that tasted different from Galar's. Sharper. Thinner. Sinnoh had always felt older to him, not in a tired way, but in the way ancient forests feel old. Deep-rooted. Heavy with history. Pikachu hopped down from his shoulder and stretched, ears twitching as he processed the new environment. His gash had scabbed over nicely, giving him a roguish look that Ash suspected he was cultivating on purpose. We need to move quickly, Cynthia said, descending the stairs behind him. She hadn't slept on the flight. He could tell because she tried to hide it and failed, her movements were a fraction slower, her blinks a fraction longer. Cross will know we've left Galar by now. He can't reach us in Sinnoh directly, but he'll start pressuring Sinnoh League officials to cooperate. How long before that matters? 48 hours, maybe less. The Sinnoh League's administrative council is technically independent, but 3 of its 7 members have financial ties to Cross's broadcasting network. He'll start pulling strings. A car was waiting, another black sedan, another anonymous driver. Ash was starting to notice a pattern in how Cynthia operated, layers of preparation, contingencies stacked inside contingencies, every move planned 3 steps ahead. It was how she battled, too. The realization made him respect her more and trust her slightly less, in a way he couldn't fully articulate. He trusted her intentions. He wasn't sure he trusted her to tell him everything. They drove north, toward Celestic Town. The Sinnoh countryside unfolded around them, rolling hills giving way to forests, mountains rising in the distance like teeth against the pale sky. Mount Coronet dominated the horizon, massive and unavoidable, its peak lost in clouds that moved against the wind. Ash watched it through the window. Somewhere inside that mountain, something was breaking. Tell me about your grandmother, he said. Cynthia looked up from her phone. Carolina. She's the reason I became a trainer. And an archaeologist. And probably the reason I'm incapable of normal social interactions. That bad? She raised me after my parents died. She's brilliant, stubborn, and has the emotional warmth of a glacier on a good day. But she knows more about Sinnoh's ancient history than anyone alive, and she's been my partner in researching the Covenant for 2 years. She knows we're coming. She's been preparing for us since before the Masters 8 started. She's the one who confirmed the Covenant's invocation requirements. Without her research, I wouldn't have known how to do what I did. The drive took 4 hours. They stopped once, at a roadside rest area that had a Pokemon Center attached to it. Ash used the time to check on his team. The full roster had been transferred from Professor Oak's lab overnight, and Nurse Joy confirmed they were all in fighting condition. He released them briefly in the rest area's open field. Lucario materialized first, immediately dropping into a combat stance before recognizing the peaceful surroundings and relaxing. Gengar oozed out of his ball with theatrical flair, grinning at nothing. Dragonite landed heavily enough to shake the ground and immediately tried to hug Ash, which was always a life-threatening experience given Dragonite's enthusiasm to size ratio. Surfetch'd materialized already holding his leek lance, ready for a battle that wasn't happening. And Pikachu watched them all from Ash's shoulder with the quiet authority of a partner who'd been there first and longest. Cynthia stood at the edge of the field, watching the reunion with an expression Ash couldn't quite read. "What?" he asked. "Your team. They don't just follow you. They orbit you. Like you're the center of a system. Is that weird? It's rare. Most trainers command respect through discipline or dominance. Your Pokemon look at you like your family. They are family." She smiled, the real one, the one that made her look younger, and turned away before he could respond to it. They reached Celestic Town in early afternoon. It was small, ancient, and stubbornly unchanged by modernity, stone buildings, unpaved streets, a shrine at its center that predated the League by centuries. The kind of place that made you lower your voice without knowing why. Carolina's house sat at the edge of town, backed up against the forest. It was built from the same gray stone as everything else, but larger, with a wing that had been converted into a research library decades ago. Books and artifacts were visible through every window. The front door opened before they reached it. Carolina Sharona was 74 years old and looked like she could still knock you down if you gave her a reason. She was shorter than Cynthia, compact and wiry, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She wore reading glasses perched on her nose and a cardigan that had seen better decades. She looked at Ash. Looked at Cynthia. Looked at Pikachu. "You're shorter than I expected," she told Ash. "Grandma," Cynthia said. "I'm stating a fact. Come in. I've made tea, and we don't have time to waste on pleasantries." The research library was exactly the kind of organized chaos that Ash associated with brilliant people. Books stacked on every surface. Maps pinned to walls, covered in annotations. A massive desk dominated the center, buried under layers of papers, photographs, and what appeared to be fragments of ancient pottery arranged in a pattern he couldn't decipher. Carolina swept a stack of journals off a chair to make room for him and handed him a cup of tea without asking if he wanted one. It was strong, bitter, and exactly what he needed after 4 hours in a car. "So," Carolina said, settling into her own chair with the air of a professor beginning a lecture. "You've accepted my granddaughter's proposal. Congratulations. Now let me tell you what you've actually agreed to, because I guarantee she hasn't told you all of it." Cynthia stiffened. "Grandma, hush." Carolina fixed her with a look that could have wilted flowers. "You told him about Sarah. Did you tell him about the binding mechanics?" Silence. "That's what I thought." Carolina turned to Ash. "The Champion's Covenant isn't a metaphor, boy. It's a physical process. When two auras bind, they don't just link, they merge. Partially, at first. But the merge deepens over time, accelerated by proximity, emotional connection, and shared combat. Eventually, the two auras become a single resonant system." Cynthia explained that part, Ash said. Did she explain that the merge is irreversible? Ash's tea stopped halfway to his mouth. Once the covenant is completed, the aura binding cannot be undone. Not by distance, not by time, not by any known method. You will feel each other's emotions. You will sense each other's physical state. If one of you is hurt, the other will know. If one of you dies, Carolina paused, and for the first time, something human flickered behind the academic exterior. The other will feel it. Every second of it. The room was very quiet. Outside, a starleaf sang in the trees. Ash set his tea down. He looked at Cynthia. She met his gaze, and he saw it, the guilt she'd been carrying. Not about the covenant itself, but about every piece of information she'd fed him in careful, managed doses, each one a little more devastating than the last. What else? He asked. Not her. Carolina. The old woman respected him for that. He could see it in the slight shift of her posture. The life force sharing. Cynthia told you about Sarah's death. What she may not have emphasized is the mechanism. The covenant creates a shared vitality pool. In normal circumstances, this is beneficial, injuries heal faster, fatigue is distributed between both parties, each partner essentially has access to double the physical reserves. But when interfacing with legendary tier consciousness, the energy demand is catastrophic. The creation trio don't think on human scales. Connecting to them is like plugging a house circuit into a power plant. And Sarah's circuit blew, Ash said quietly. Colorfully put, but accurate. The strain exceeded her body's capacity. The shared vitality pool meant Aldrich was pulled down with her. He survived only because the connection severed at the moment of her death, and even then, he was left shattered. Ash absorbed this. He was quiet for longer than Cynthia expected. She'd braced for his reaction, whatever it was, but the silence was worse than anger. Finally, he spoke. Is there a way to reduce the strain? Carolina's eyebrows rose. You're not asking if we should abandon the plan? No. I'm asking how we make it survivable. Cynthia exhaled, a sound so small only someone paying close attention would have caught it. Carolina studied him for a long moment. Then she stood, crossed to a map pinned on the far wall, and tapped it. This is Mount Coronet. The spear pillar is here, at the summit. The Covenant's completion ceremony must take place at the pillar. It's the only location where the dimensional boundaries are thin enough for the aura binding to achieve legendary tier resonance. She traced a line down the mountain. But the pillar isn't just a peak. It's the apex of a network, 7 seal sites distributed around Coronet's base and lower elevations. These seals were created by the ancients to regulate the flow of dimensional energy. Think of them as pressure valves. When functioning properly, they moderate the energy that flows through the pillar, preventing any single connection from being overwhelmed. And if those seals are damaged? Ash asked. Carolina's expression hardened. Then the energy is unregulated. Raw. Any connection made at the pillar would be like drinking from a fire hose. Which is exactly what happened to Sarah and Aldrich. Several of the seals were already weakened by the crisis they were responding to. And right now? Right now, at least 3 of the 7 seals have been deliberately tampered with. Carolina pulled a folder from her desk and spread its contents, photographs of ancient stone structures, covered in strange symbols, with clear signs of modern interference. Drill marks. Chemical residue. Equipment fragments that didn't belong within 1,000 years of the ruins they were found in. Someone is breaking the seals on purpose, Ash said. Systematically. One by one. And they're using technology derived from the red chain, Cynthia cut in. Team Galactic's research. The technology Cyrus developed to control the creation trio. Someone has reverse-engineered it and is using it to disrupt the seals instead of control the legends directly. Ash's jaw tightened. He remembered Team Galactic. Remembered standing at the spear pillar while reality tore itself apart. Remembered a man so consumed by his vision that he'd been willing to unmake the world to achieve it. Who? He asked. We don't know, Cynthia said. Not yet. The tampering has been careful, professional. No traces left that point to any known organization. Carolina made a sound, something between a cough and a grunt of disagreement. Cynthia shot her a warning look that the old woman ignored entirely. I have a theory, Carolina said. But my granddaughter considers it too speculative to share. Share it, Ash said. Carolina walked to a glass case mounted on the wall. Inside was a fragment of stone tablet, covered in script so old it had partially faded into the surface. This is the only surviving fragment of Aldrich's personal records. I found it in the deep ruins beneath Celestic 30 years ago. It describes his experience in the Covenant, his bond with Sarah, the interfacing with the creation trio, and the aftermath. Most of it is damaged beyond reading. But this section, she pointed to a cluster of symbols near the bottom, is clear enough. She translated from memory. I will not die in this mountain. The space between worlds holds no death, only preservation. I will wait. I will learn. I will find a way to free humanity from the tyranny of gods who care nothing for the prayers spoken to them. The words hung in the air like smoke. You think Aldrich is alive, Ash said. I think the distortion world doesn't obey normal rules of time or mortality. I think a man who was half dead, consumed by grief, and standing at the threshold of dimensions when his partner died could very easily have fallen through. And I think the distortion world would have preserved him the way it preserves everything, twisted, changed, but intact. Grandma believes the seal tampering is Aldrich's work, Cynthia said. A 500-year-old ghost sabotaging the world from inside a dimensional pocket. You say that like it's ridiculous, Carolina replied. In a world where a 10-year-old boy can befriend the god of time. The look she gave Ash made it clear she knew exactly who that 10-year-old had been. Ash stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at Celestic Town, the ancient stones, the quiet streets, the shrine that had stood for 1,000 years. Mount Coronet loomed beyond the forest, impossibly massive, its peak hidden by clouds that pulsed with faint, wrong light. Okay, he said. So we need to do 3 things. Complete the Covenant at Spear Pillar. Repair or protect the remaining seals. And find whoever's breaking them before they finish the job. That's a reasonable summary, Carolina said. How long do we have? The Covenant must be completed within 1 lunar cycle of invocation. That gives you 26 days. The seals, Carolina spread her hands. Impossible to predict. If the current pace of tampering continues, the remaining 4 seals could be destroyed within 2 weeks. Maybe less. Then we start today. Ash turned from the window. Which seal is closest? There's one beneath Mount Coronet's eastern face, Cynthia said. About a day's journey from here. I've been monitoring it remotely, the last reading was stable, but that was 3 days ago. Then that's where we go. Carolina watched him with sharp, evaluating eyes. Then she grunted, a sound that, from her, was practically an ovation. You'll need supplies. And information. Sit down, boy. We have work to do before you go charging off into mountains. They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Carolina was methodical and relentless, she loaded them with maps, data readouts, historical references, and a portable scanner calibrated to detect the specific energy signatures the red chain technology emitted. She also produced 2 ancient texts, hand-bound, leather-covered, fragile, containing the Covenant's completion ritual in its original language. I can read these, Cynthia said, handling them with the reverence of someone who understood their value. You'd better. The ceremony requires specific phrasing. The old language isn't forgiving of mistakes. Ash's contribution to the preparation was more practical. He worked with his Pokemon in the field behind Carolina's house, running drills and testing combinations. If they were heading into a mountain full of potential hostiles, he wanted his team sharp. Lucario was the focus. The aura Pokemon had always been sensitive to Ash's emotional state, but today it was different. Lucario kept pausing mid-drill, turning to face Mount Coronet with ears flat and teeth bared. "You feel it too," Ash said. Lucario nodded slowly. Through their bond, not the covenant, just the natural connection between trainer and Pokemon, Ash caught fragments of what Lucario sensed. Wrongness. A dissonance in the world's aura, like a note played out of key. It was coming from the mountain, and it was getting louder. Cynthia found him as the sun was setting, golden light painting the celestic ruins in amber. She'd changed into practical traveling clothes, boots, dark pants, a jacket designed for mountain terrain. Without the champion's black coat, she looked different. More human. Less icon. "We should leave at first light," she said. Agreed. She stood beside him, watching the sunset paint the mountain. For a moment, they were just two people standing in a field, and the weight of everything, the covenant, the crisis, the politics, the impossible situation they'd chosen, was suspended. "I'm sorry," Cynthia said. Ash glanced at her. "For what?" "For not telling you everything at once. The irreversibility. The life force mechanics. I gave you the information in stages because I was," she stopped. "Reorganized. Because I was managing you. The way I manage everything. Strategy and controlled disclosure and always being 3 steps ahead. You deserved better than that." "Yeah," Ash said. "I did." The honesty hit her. He saw it land, the flinch she almost hid. "But I understand why you did it," he continued. "You were carrying this for 2 years. Alone. And you needed me to say yes, and you were terrified that if you dumped everything on me at once, I'd walk away. Would you have?" "No. And that's the point. I wouldn't have walked away no matter what you told me. You didn't need to manage me, Cynthia. You just needed to trust me." She was quiet for a long time. The sunset deepened, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. "I'm not good at trusting people," she said finally. "I've been a champion for 12 years. In that world, information is power, and sharing it is weakness. I've spent so long being the person who knows more than everyone else in the room that I've forgotten how to just be honest. Without calculating the effect. I'm not asking you to stop being strategic. I'm asking you to stop being strategic with me." She turned to face him. The fading light caught the gray of her eyes, and for a moment, Ash saw the woman behind every wall she'd ever built, brilliant, afraid, lonely in the specific way that comes from being the strongest person in every room for too long. "I'll try," she said. "I'll probably fail sometimes. But I'll try. That's all I'm asking." Pikachu, who had been sitting between them pretending to watch the sunset, looked up at Ash and then at Cynthia and made a small, satisfied sound. Like a judge who'd weighed the evidence and found the verdict acceptable. Cynthia looked down at him. "Did your Pikachu just approve of me? He's a harsh critic. Take the win." Something cracked between them, not tension, but a wall. And through the gap, something warmer started to grow. They left at dawn. The route to the eastern seal site took them through Sinnoh's deep wilderness, forests so thick the canopy turned day into perpetual twilight, mountain trails that switch-backed up steep ridgelines, and stretches of open ground where the wind came off Coronet cold and sharp enough to bite. They walked. Not because they couldn't fly, Cynthia's Togekiss or Ash's Dragonite could have covered the distance in hours, but because the terrain near the seal sites interfered with flight. Dimensional instability creates turbulence patterns that aren't on any weather chart, Cynthia explained. 2 trainers crashed their flying types near the Solation seal last month. Both survived, but the Pokémon were badly hurt. So they walked. And in walking, they talked. Not about the crisis. Not about the Covenant. About everything else. Ash told her about Pallet Town. About his mom's cooking and Professor Oak's terrible poetry and the rivalry with Gary that had shaped him more than any batch. He told her about the time Pikachu was so sick he'd carried him through a rainstorm to the nearest center, terrified that his partner was dying, and how that night was the moment Pikachu decided to trust him for real. Cynthia told him about growing up in Celestic. About being the weird girl who read ancient texts instead of playing with other kids. About the day she found her Gibble, half dead in a cave, abandoned by a trainer who didn't want a runt, and how she'd nursed it back to health and made a promise that she'd never let anything she loved be discarded. That Gibble was Garchomp now, and the promise still held. They sparred ideas while they hiked. Ash would throw out battle strategies, wild, unorthodox things that made Cynthia's eyebrows climb, and she'd counter with analytical refinements that made his ideas actually workable. It was a creative friction that neither of them had experienced before, and it was intoxicating in a way that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with finding someone who matched you. By mid-afternoon, the forest thinned and the terrain shifted. The ground under their feet changed from soil to stone, smooth, dark rock that felt warm despite the mountain cold. Ancient carvings appeared on boulders and cliff faces, worn nearly smooth by centuries of weather but still recognizable, symbols of Dialga, Palkia, Giratina. The Holy Trinity. "We're in the seal zone," Cynthia said, pulling out Carolina's scanner. The device hummed, its small screen flickering with readings. Energy levels are elevated. Higher than the last remote reading. How much higher? 40%. Her expression tightened. That's not natural fluctuation. Someone's been here. They moved more carefully after that. Ash released Lucario, who ranged ahead with silent efficiency, aura senses extended. Pikachu stayed on Ash's shoulder, cheeks sparking intermittently as ambient energy tickled his electrical systems. The seal site was in a cavern. The entrance was hidden behind a waterfall, a narrow gap in the cliff face that you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. Inside, the cavern opened up into a space the size of a cathedral, lit by natural phosphorescence in the rock walls. At the center stood the seal. It was a structure of dark stone, roughly cylindrical, about 3 meters tall. Ancient symbols covered every surface, glowing faintly with residual energy. The air around it vibrated with a low hum that Ash felt in his bones more than heard. But something was wrong. One side of the seal bore fresh marks, clean, precise cuts in the stone, as if someone had removed sections with surgical tools. And at the base, a device sat like a parasite, a small, metallic unit with glowing red nodes that pulsed in a rhythm that felt deliberately out of sync with the seal's natural hum. Red chain technology, Cynthia breathed. She knelt beside it, scanner in hand. It's creating a counter-resonance. Disrupting the seal's natural frequency. Can you remove it? Carefully. The wrong approach could trigger a cascade failure. Give me a minute. Ash stood guard while Cynthia worked. Lucario positioned himself at the cavern entrance, and Pikachu hopped down from Ash's shoulder to patrol the perimeter. The phosphorescent light painted everything in blue-green shades, and the hum of the seal, disrupted, wrong, struggling, was like listening to a song being slowly pulled out of tune. Cynthia's hands were steady and precise. She'd produced a toolkit from her pack, not standard issue, but specialized instruments she'd clearly assembled for exactly this kind of work. She disconnected the device's power nodes one by one, her scanner monitoring the seal's energy output in real time. The damage isn't catastrophic, she said, not looking up. This device has been operating for approximately 72 hours. Long enough to weaken the seal, but not long enough to break it entirely. If I can neutralize the counter-resonance and allow the seal's natural frequency to reassert, Lucario snarled. Ash spun. The cavern entrance was darkening, not from a shadow, but from a presence. Something was blocking the light. A man walked in. Tall. Pale hair catching the phosphorescence. Dark coat hanging loose over broad shoulders. He moved with the easy grace of someone completely confident in every environment, and his eyes, ice blue, looked sharp as broken glass, found Ash with the precision of a targeting system. "Hello, Ash," Tobias said. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Ash's body went rigid. Every nerve fired at once. Lucario dropped into a combat stance, aura blazing from his palms, and Pikachu leaped back to Ash's shoulder with cheeks crackling at full charge. Tobias stopped 10 paces away. He wasn't visibly armed, no pokeball in hand, no threatening posture. Just standing there, relaxed, watching them with the mild interest of a man who'd arrived early for an appointment. "Tobias." Ash's voice was flat. "Controlled. The Sinnoh League. Darkrai and Latios. You remember." "I'm flattered. Hard to forget the guy who wiped half my team with a mythical Pokemon. You took down Darkrai. Very few can say that." Tobias tilted his head. "You've gotten stronger since then. I felt it in the broadcast of your match against Cynthia. Impressive work. What are you doing here?" Tobias glanced past Ash to where Cynthia knelt by the disruption device, her hands frozen mid-work. "I placed that device," he said conversationally. 3 days ago. Along with the ones at the Solation and Western Ridge sites. My assignment was to neutralize 4 of the 7 seals before the new moon." The casual admission hung in the air. No denial, no misdirection. Just a statement of fact, delivered with the calm of someone describing their morning routine. "Why?" Ash asked. "Because the seals aren't protection. They're chains." Tobias's voice didn't change pitch, but something shifted underneath, a current of conviction so deep it altered the texture of his words. The creation trio didn't create these barriers voluntarily. They were imposed, constraints placed on divine beings by ancient humans who feared power they couldn't control. The seals don't protect our world. They imprison the gods in a role they never chose. And your solution is to let reality collapse? My solution is to let the creation trio make their own choice. Free them from the seals, from the boundaries, from the obligation to maintain a universe that has never once thanked them for it. If they choose to continue holding reality together, fine. But it should be their choice. Not an ancient human's decree enforced by stone and stolen technology. Ash stared at him. The worst part was that it wasn't a crazy speech. It wasn't ranting or raving. It was measured, thoughtful, and rooted in a genuine philosophical position that Ash couldn't dismiss outright. "And if they choose not to?" he asked. "If they let go? Then perhaps we were never meant to exist in the first place." "That's insane. That's faith." Tobias smiled. "Not cruelly, sadly. I don't expect you to agree. But I wanted you to understand. What we're doing isn't destruction. It's liberation." "We," Ash repeated. "Who's we?" "The pillars. We serve someone who understands the cost of the current system better than anyone alive. Someone who lived through a covenant, watched the person he loved die for the sake of gods who didn't even notice, and decided that no one should ever have to make that sacrifice again." Cynthia stood up slowly behind Ash. "Aldrich." Tobias's expression didn't change, but his eyes flicked to her with new attention. "You know the name." "I know the history. A champion from 500 years ago who fell into the distortion world after his partner died. My grandmother pieced it together from fragmentary records. Your grandmother is a brilliant woman. She's correct. Aldrich survived. The distortion world preserved him, changed him, but preserved him. He spent centuries studying the dimensional architecture from the inside, and he's found the truth the ancients tried to bury: the creation trio are prisoners, and the seals are their shackles." The cavern hummed. The disrupted seal pulsed with erratic energy, and the phosphorescent light flickered in response. "Let me guess," Ash said. "He sent you to soften us up. Explain the philosophy, make us doubt, maybe even recruit us." "No. He sent me to finish the job on this seal." Tobias reached into his coat. The conversation is my own initiative. I respect you, Ash. I wanted you to understand before things get difficult. They're about to get difficult. I'm afraid so. Tobias's hand came out of his coat with a pokeball. It was black, not a standard design, but something customized, with a red core that pulsed like a heartbeat. Don't do this, Ash said. I have to. I believe in what we're doing. And belief isn't belief if you abandon it when it gets hard. He pressed the release. Darkrai materialized. The cavern's temperature dropped 10 degrees in an instant. The shadows on the walls deepened, thickened, moved with an intelligence that had nothing to do with light sources. Darkrai floated a meter above the ground, its single visible eye burning ice blue, and the hum of the seal was drowned by something deeper, a vibration that lived in the hindbrain, the part of the human mind that still remembered being prey. Ash had faced Darkrai before. He'd been 16, overwhelmed, out of his depth. The memory of watching his Pokémon drop one by one, Heracross, Torkoal, Gible, Swellow, was burned into him. He wasn't 16 anymore. Pikachu, he said. Start us off. Pikachu launched from his shoulder like a bolt of yellow lightning, cheeks blazing. The first thunderbolt split the air, a blinding lance of electricity aimed directly at Darkray's center mass. Darkrai dissolved into shadow. The thunderbolt struck empty air, scorched the cavern wall, and Darkrai reformed 3 meters to the left, already launching a dark void. Dodge, and Iron Tail the ground. Pikachu twisted mid-air, the dark void spheres screaming past him close enough to ruffle his fur. His tail flashed silver as he struck the cavern floor, and the impact sent a shockwave of broken stone in every direction, not aimed at Darkrai, but disrupting the shadows on the ground, denying the pitch-black Pokémon places to sink into. Quick attack, keep moving. Pikachu became a streak, bouncing off walls, floor, the seal structure itself, never staying in one place long enough for Darkrai to lock on. It was a tactic Ash had developed over years. Against opponents that could phase and teleport, you didn't try to pin them down. You moved faster than they could track and forced them to react to you. Darkray's eye tracked Pikachu with machine precision. It launched a Dream Eater, useless against an awake target, but that wasn't the point. The move's energy wave disrupted the air, creating zones of psychic distortion that Pikachu had to navigate around. It was chess. Darkrai played defense, area denial, forcing Pikachu into narrower corridors of movement. Pikachu played speed, aggression, refusing to let the battlefield become static. Thunderbolt, widespread. Pikachu's cheeks erupted. Not a focused bolt but a fan of electricity, covering a 100-degree arc. Darkrai couldn't dodge all of it, the edges caught its form, and it hissed, flickering between solid and shadow. Now, Electro-Ebb. The net of crackling energy hit Darkrai square, pinning it against the cavern wall. For exactly 2 seconds, the mythical Pokémon was immobilized. Pikachu hit it with everything. Iron Tail, charged with residual electricity, struck Darkrai across the torso. The impact blew the Electro-Ebb apart and sent Darkrai careening across the cavern. It struck the far wall, cracked the stone, and slid down. Tobias's expression shifted for the first time. Not panic, but recognition. This wasn't the Ash Ketchum he'd fought years ago. This was someone else entirely. Darkrai rose. Slowly, painfully, but it rose. And its eye burned brighter, and the shadows in the cavern began to move, not flicker, not shift, but actively coil and surge like living things. Dark pulse, Tobias said quietly. The attack came from everywhere at once. Not a beam, a sphere of dark energy expanding outward from Darkray's body, filling the entire cavern. There was no dodging it. No counter. Just pure, overwhelming force. Lucario. Ash's aura Pokémon was already moving. He planted himself between Pikachu and the expanding wave, palms forward, and poured every ounce of aura into a protect that blazed like a blue star in the darkness. The dark pulse hit the shield. The impact was titanic. Lucario's feet skidded backward on the stone, his arms shaking, his aura flickering under the strain. Pikachu sheltered behind him, and behind them both, Cynthia threw herself over the disruption device to shield it from the shockwave. Lucario held. Barely. His protect collapsed the instant the dark pulse faded, and he dropped to one knee, panting. The cavern was wrecked. Stalactites had shattered. The phosphorescent light was gutted, leaving only the pulsing glow of the disrupted seal and Darkray's burning eye. Ash made a decision. Lucario, Aura Sphere. Maximum charge. Lucario looked at him. Ash met his gaze and nodded. They'd trained this. Pushed the limits of what an Aura Sphere could hold, how much energy Lucario could channel before it became dangerous. Lucario understood. He stood, raised both palms, and began to charge. The sphere started the size of a baseball. It grew. The blue light intensified, and Ash felt it, felt the pull on his own aura, the resonance between his energy and Lucario's, the connection that went deeper than training or friendship. The sphere reached the size of a basketball. Then a beach ball. The air around it crackled and distorted, and the walls of the cavern groaned. Darkrai saw what was coming. It began to phase into shadow. Pikachu, now. Pikachu, still sheltered behind Lucario, broke right. A single, focused thunderbolt, not at Darkrai, but at the ground around it, electrifying the stone floor and the shadows clinging to it. Darkrai couldn't phase into electrified shadow. It was forced solid, forced physical, forced to exist in the real world for exactly the time it took Lucario to release. The aura sphere hit Darkray's center mass. The explosion blew the cavern entrance wider by 3 feet. Rock dust filled the air. The shockwave knocked Ash off his feet, and he hit the ground rolling, covering his head. Cynthia was knocked sideways, catching herself against the seal structure. When the dust cleared, Darkrai lay on the cavern floor. Not unconscious, but close. Its form flickered like a dying candle, and the shadows around it had gone still and flat and ordinary. Tobias recalled it without a word. His face was pale in the dim light, and his hand, the one holding the poke ball, had the faintest tremor. "You've gotten better," he said. His voice was slightly hoarse. "I had motivation." Ash stood, brushing dust from his jacket. Pikachu was back on his shoulder, panting but fierce. Lucario stood behind them, arms hanging, drained but upright. Tobias looked at them. Looked at the shattered cavern, the cracked seal, the evidence of a battle that had exceeded anything he prepared for. Then he looked at Cynthia, still braced against the seal, her hair loose and wild, her eyes burning with something between fury and admiration. "You can disable the device," he told her. "I won't stop you." Cynthia stared at him. "Why?" "Because continuing to fight here risks destroying the seal entirely, which helps no one." Tobias pocketed Darkray's ball. "And because I want to see what happens next. The Covenant hasn't been invoked in 5 centuries. Aldrich believes he knows what it will do. I'm not as certain." He turned to leave. Paused at the ruined entrance. "One more thing," he said, not turning around. "The man who started the Covenant is the one who will end it. You don't know who you're dancing with." He walked into the mountain and was gone. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of Cynthia's toolkit hitting the ground. She'd been holding it so tightly during the battle that the handle had left marks on her palm. She flexed her hand, picked the kit up, and went back to work on the disruption device without a word. Ash watched her. Lucario sank to a sitting position, exhausted. Pikachu's cheeks still sparked intermittently, remnant charge from the battle. "You okay?" Ash asked. "Fine." Her voice was clipped. Focused. She was channeling emotion into action, a survival mechanism he recognized because he used the same one. 20 minutes later, the disruption device powered down. The seal's hum changed, still disrupted, still wrong, but slowly, incrementally finding its way back towards something natural. "It'll take days to fully recover," Cynthia said, packing up her tools. "But the active sabotage has stopped. This seal will hold. 3 more compromised. 4 still intact. We can't protect them all. Not just the 2 of us." Ash pulled out his phone. "Then we need help." He called Brock first. "I need you in Sinnoh. Now. Bring whoever you trust." Brock didn't ask questions. He said, "I'm on my way," and hung up. Dawn was next. She was already in Sinnoh, in Twin Leaf Town, and she'd been monitoring local news about the dimensional disturbances. "It's bad, Ash. The weather patterns are going crazy. Snowpoint is getting lightning storms. Sunnyshore had hail yesterday. Something is wrong." "I know. I need you to get to the Solation Seal site. I'll send you coordinates and the scanner data. Don't approach if you detect active hostiles, just observe and report." "Got it. Be careful, Ash. You too." He called Leon. Then Steven. Then Lance. Each conversation was brief, direct, and ended the same way, with a champion agreeing to mobilize. Cynthia watched him work with an expression that had evolved from surprise to something deeper. He wasn't asking permission. He wasn't waiting for her to lead. He was building a coalition in real time, calling in debts and friendships and shared history, assembling a response network that matched the scope of the threat. "When did you become a general?" she asked when he hung up from his last call. "Right around the time I realized we're fighting a war." She looked at him, really looked, the way she'd looked at him across the battlefield in Winden, and what she saw made her throat tight. "Let's move," she said. "We need to get out of the mountain before dark." They camped that night in a forest clearing at Coronet's base. The sky above was clear but wrong, stars visible but slightly off position, as if someone had bumped the celestial map a few degrees to the left. The effect was subtle enough that most people wouldn't notice, but Ash had spent enough nights under open skies to know when the stars weren't where they should be. He sat by the fire, Pikachu sleeping in his lap, Lucario resting against a tree nearby. Across the fire, Cynthia studied the ancient texts by the light of a portable lamp, her lips moving silently as she worked through the covenant ceremony's language. "The ceremony requires both parties to speak," she said without looking up. "The vows are partially prescribed and partially spontaneous. The ancient language provides the framework, but the binding words must come from the heart. They can't be scripted. So we have to improvise. In a dead language I've only partially taught you. I'll wing it." She looked up. "You can't wing it with a 500-year-old aura-binding ritual. Watch me." She stared at him. Then she laughed, not the controlled, surprised laughs she'd been producing, but a full laugh, warm and unguarded, and the sound of it cracked something open in the night air between them. Ash grinned. "That's a good sound. You should do it more often. You're impossible." "Yeah, but in a charming way." "Debatable." They held each other's gaze across the fire. The flames painted her face in warm tones, turning the gold of her hair almost copper, and the shadows softened the angles of her features. She was beautiful, Ash had always known that, the way you know the sky is blue, as a background fact. But right now, in the firelight, with her hair loose and her guard down and her laugh still echoing, it wasn't a background fact. It was the only fact. "Ash," she said. "Yeah. I'm glad it was you." He didn't ask what she meant. He knew. "Me too," he said. Pikachu, allegedly asleep, smiled. They reached Hearthome City the next afternoon. The city was Sinnoh's cultural heart, theaters, contest halls, the old cathedral, streets filled with artisans and performers. But today, something was off. The streets were quieter than they should have been. Shops were closing early. People moved with the hurried purpose of those who felt unsafe without being able to name the danger. Ash felt it in his skin before he saw it. The air rippled. Not heat shimmer. Not mirage. A visible distortion, like looking through warped glass, running vertically through the space above the city's central plaza. Through the distortion, the buildings on the other side looked wrong, same structures, but subtly different colors, different proportions, as if seen through someone else's eyes. The distortion world, Cynthia said. Her voice was tight. It's bleeding through. People had noticed. A crowd was forming at the edges of the plaza, keeping their distance, phones raised. Children were crying. A woman was pulling her Lopunny away from the distortion, the Pokémon's ears flat against its head. The distortion pulsed. And through it, faintly, like sound through water, came a roar. Not a sound any normal creature could make. A vibration that bypassed the ears entirely and went straight to the primal brain, the part that understood fear without language. Giratina. The lord of the distortion world, raging against its boundaries. The distortion widened. Buildings at its edges began to phase, flickering between their normal appearance and something alien, structures that didn't obey normal geometry, angles that hurt to look at. A section of the plaza floor shifted, stone tiles rearranging into a pattern that didn't belong in Euclidean space. It's expanding, Cynthia said. If it breaks through completely, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Ash had been at ground zero when Dialga and Palkia had warped Alamos Town. He knew what happened when dimensions collided without control. We stop it, he said. Now. But how? This wasn't a battle they could fight with Pokémon. The distortion wasn't an enemy, it was a symptom. A dimensional barrier weakening to the point of permeability. Cynthia grabbed his arm. The Covenant. The aura binding. If we can create a resonance, we haven't completed the ceremony. The binding has already started. You felt it, on the plane, at the seal site. Our auras are beginning to synchronize on their own. If we can push that connection, deliberately, we might be able to generate enough resonance to stabilize the distortion. Might? It's never been tried outside the ceremony. How do we push it? Cynthia looked at him with an intensity that made the chaos around them feel distant. We let go, she said. The aura binding resists conscious control, you can't force it. But you can stop resisting it. Drop every wall, every barrier, every instinct to keep yourself separate. Let your aura reach for mine. Ash understood. It was the same thing he'd done at the Tree of Beginning, the same surrender, the same trust. Not giving up, but opening up. He took her hand. Not strategically. Not because the situation demanded it. He took her hand because in that moment, with reality fracturing around them, it was the most natural thing in the world. Ready? He asked. No, she said. Do it anyway. He closed his eyes. Let go. It was like falling into warm water. His aura, the energy he'd carried all his life, felt in flashes and fragments, never fully understood, expanded outward. And Cynthia's met it. Not with resistance or analysis or strategic calculation, but with something raw and unguarded that she'd never shown another living soul. Their auras touched. Merged. And the world exploded into blue. Ash felt her. Not her surface thoughts, deeper. Her fear of failure. Her grief for Sarah, a woman she'd never met but mourned as a predecessor. Her guilt for dragging Ash into this. Her admiration for his courage, which she'd categorized as recklessness until she understood it was something braver. And beneath all of it, running like a river under rock, a loneliness so deep it had become invisible to her, the cost of being the strongest person in every room for 12 years. And she felt him. His stubbornness, his loyalty, his absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible. His fear, yes, fear, because he wasn't fearless, he just moved forward anyway. His love for his Pokémon, so vast and unconditional it defied categorization. And his trust, in her, specifically, given freely and completely, not because she'd earned it through disclosure but because his gut told him she was worth believing in. The resonance built. Not sound, not light, but something that encompassed both and transcended both. A frequency that rippled outward from where they stood, hand in hand, in the center of a city that was tearing itself apart. The distortion felt it. The warped air shuddered. The phasing buildings flickered faster, and then slower. The impossible angles began to straighten. The alien geometry of the distortion world's intrusion softened, eased, like a dislocated joint being gently guided back into place. Through the resonance, Ash felt something vast and ancient and terrified. Giratina. Not attacking, struggling. The lord of the distortion world, pressing against barriers it was supposed to maintain, not out of malice but because the barriers were failing and the effort of holding them was tearing it apart. Ash reached out. Not with words, with feeling. The same way he'd reached out to every legendary he'd ever encountered. I see you. I hear you. You're not alone. The vast presence shuddered. And then, tentatively, like a wounded animal accepting help, it leaned into the resonance. The distortion snapped shut. Not gradually. Instantly. The warped air, the phasing buildings, the alien geometry, all of it vanished in a pulse of blue light that washed across Hearthome City like a silent wave. The plaza was a plaza again. The buildings were solid and real and obeying every law of physics they were supposed to. Ash opened his eyes. He was on his knees. When had he fallen? Cynthia was beside him, also on her knees, still gripping his hand. Her face was pale and her eyes were wide and she was looking at him like she'd never seen him before. That, she breathed. What was that? I think we just talked to Giratina. You reached it. Through the resonance. I felt you do it, I felt it respond. It's scared, Cynthia. Whatever's happening to the dimensional barriers, it's hurting them. The creation trio aren't causing this. They're victims. She stared at him. Then she looked at the plaza, normal, peaceful, people cautiously emerging from cover, and let out a breath that shook. The covenant works, she said. It actually works. Of course it works. Did you doubt it? I'm a scientist, Ash. I always doubt. He helped her to her feet. They were both unsteady, drained in a way that went beyond physical fatigue. The aura resonance had taken something out of them, not permanently, but significantly. Pikachu was at Ash's feet, looking up at them with an expression of deep concern. Ash scooped him up. I'm okay, buddy. Just tired. Pika Pika, Pikachu said skeptically. They found a bench at the plaza's edge and sat. Around them, Hearthome was recovering, people returning to the streets, emergency services arriving, the initial shock giving way to the human need to discuss, document, and gossip about what the hell had just happened. Ash's phone buzzed. Then again. Then continuously. He checked it. The Hearthome distortion had been captured on dozens of cameras, and the moment he and Cynthia had resolved it, two figures standing in the center of a dimensional breach, bathed in blue light, was already going viral. Across every platform, the footage was spreading with the speed of a thunderstorm. And with it, the narrative was shifting. The Champions' Covenant wasn't a stunt or an anachronism. It was something real, something powerful, and something that had just saved a city. Cross is going to have a hard time spinning this, Ash said. Cynthia leaned against the bench's backrest and closed her eyes. Let him try. We have bigger problems. She was right. The immediate crisis was resolved, but the underlying cause remained. Someone was systematically destroying the seals, weakening the dimensional barriers, and the creation trio were suffering for it. An hour later, sitting in a borrowed conference room at Hearthome's Pokemon Center, Ash's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He answered. Don't hang up, said Tobias. Ash's hand tightened on the phone. Cynthia, sitting across from him, read his expression and went still. "I'm listening," Ash said. "I saw what happened in Heart Home. The Covenant resonance. I didn't think it was possible outside the completion ceremony. Neither did we. What do you want, Tobias?" A pause. When Tobias spoke again, something had changed in his voice. The cool certainty was still there, but fractured, like glass that had been struck hard enough to web but not shatter. "I told you I believe in what we're doing. I still do. But what I saw in that city." Another pause. Giratina wasn't raging, was it? It was calling for help. Ash said nothing. "Aldrich told us the creation trio were indifferent," Tobias continued. "That they maintained reality out of obligation, not choice, and felt nothing for the beings living within it. That freeing them was an act of compassion, releasing prisoners from a sentence they didn't deserve. But prisoners don't cry for help from their jailers. And what I saw through that distortion, what I felt, even from a distance, wasn't indifference. It was pain." Ash looked at Cynthia. She was listening intently, her expression unreadable. "What are you offering?" Ash asked. "Information. Aldrich's plan. The remaining SEAL targets. The technology being used and how to counter it. Everything I know." "Why?" "Because I joined the Pillars to free gods, not to torture them. And I'm beginning to think I was told a story that served someone else's grief more than it served the truth." Ash covered the phone. "He's offering to turn," he told Cynthia. "It could be a trap. Could be. But he pulled his punch at the SEAL site. And he didn't have to call." Cynthia waited. He watched her process, not just logic but instinct, the part of her that read people the way she read ancient texts. "Ask him about Aldrich," she said. "The real Aldrich. Not the mythology." Ash uncovered the phone. "Tell me about him. Not the philosophy. The man." Silence on the line. Then, slowly, "He's broken. 500 years of grief and isolation and rage, held together by a singular purpose. He doesn't eat. He barely sleeps. He talks to Sarah, his dead partner, when he thinks no one can hear. He's built an entire ideology around the idea that the gods killed her, because the alternative, that the universe is simply cruel and there's no one to blame, is a truth he can't survive." Ash's chest tightened. Not with anger. With something worse. Compassion. "Where can we meet?" he asked. "Celestic Town. Tomorrow night. The old shrine, after dark. I'll come alone." "So will we." "Ash." Tobias's voice dropped. "What I'm doing, betraying the Pillars, betraying Aldrich, if he finds out, he'll kill me. Not as punishment. As mercy. In his mind, there's no greater kindness than freeing someone from a world ruled by uncaring gods. I won't let that happen. You might not have a choice." A pause. "Tomorrow night." The line went dead. Ash set the phone down. The conference room was quiet. Through the window, Hartholm's evening lights were coming on, normal, mundane, a city going about its business as if reality hadn't nearly torn apart in its central plaza 3 hours ago. "We should tell the others," Cynthia said. "If Tobias is genuine, his intelligence could change everything. And if he's not, we're walking into a trap with our eyes open." "Yes. But we've been doing that since Wyndon." Ash smiled. It was tired, but real. They spent the evening coordinating. Brock had arrived in Sinnoh and was en route to the Western Ridge SEAL site with a team of Pokemon Rangers. Dawn reported that the Solation site showed signs of tampering but was still partially functional. Leon was working on something in Galar, he wouldn't say what, just that it involved making Cross's life difficult. Cynthia handled the Sinnoh League's administrative council, which was in turmoil. Cross had made his calls, and 3 of the 7 council members were pushing for a formal investigation into Cynthia's unauthorized activities. The other 4, led by a fierce old woman named Counselor Harada who'd been a gym leader 40 years ago, told Cross's proxies exactly where they could put their investigation. "Harada's buying us time," Cynthia told Ash. "But she can't hold the council forever. Cross is offering financial incentives, increased broadcast revenue, infrastructure funding, in exchange for cooperation. It's hard to fight someone who's bribing you with things your region actually needs. Then we need to give them a reason to refuse the bribe. Such as proof of the dimensional crisis, of the seal tampering, of the pillars and what they're doing. We make it public, and Cross can't frame this as a rogue champion's power grab. It becomes what it actually is, a threat to the entire world that 2 champions are trying to stop." Cynthia studied him. "You want to release the evidence? All of it? Scanner data? Photos of the tampering devices? Video from Heart Home? Carolina's research? Everything? That would cause panic. It would cause awareness. Panic is what happens when people find out the truth from a dimensional breach opening in their backyard. Awareness is what happens when leaders tell them the truth first and say, 'We have a plan.'" She was quiet for a long time. "You're right," she said finally. "And I hate that you're right, because it means I've been wrong. I've been treating this like a classified operation, need to know, controlled disclosure, managed information. And all it's done is give Cross room to fill the narrative vacuum with his own story. It's not too late to change the approach." "No. It's not." She pulled out her phone. "I'll call Carolina. She can prepare a public briefing. If we're going to do this, we do it properly, scientific data, historical context, and a clear statement from the Sinnoh champion that the threat is real and being addressed. That's the Cynthia I want in this fight." She looked at him, and the corner of her mouth twitched. Was the other Cynthia insufficient? The other Cynthia was trying to save the world alone. This one has a partner. The word hung between them. Partner. Not in the covenant sense, not in the romantic sense, but in the simplest and most fundamental sense, 2 people who'd chosen to face something together and were stronger for it. Cynthia's expression softened. "Just slightly. Just enough." "Partner," she repeated. "I can work with that." They left Heart Home the next morning, traveling north toward Celestic Town for the meeting with Tobias. The journey took them through terrain that was increasingly unsettled, not by anything visible, but by an atmospheric wrongness that every trainer's instinct screamed at. Wild Pokémon were behaving erratically. Starly flocks flew in tight, nervous circles instead of their normal V-formations. Bidoof, usually docile to the point of absurdity, burrowed into the earth and refused to emerge. A pair of Luxray watched them from a ridge with uncharacteristic stillness, their manes crackling with unfocused electricity. "They feel it," Ash said. "The dimensional stress. It's putting every living thing on edge. Pokémon are more sensitive to environmental energy than humans. If the barriers continue to weaken, we'll see behavioral disruption across every species in Sinnoh. Can't imagine what that looks like at scale. Stampedes. Mass migrations. Territorial aggression from species that are normally peaceful. Ecological collapse, essentially. And that's before the physical effects of dimensional bleed-through." The mountain loomed. Closer now, it was even more imposing, a wall of rock and ice that divided the region in half, its slope scarred by ancient geological violence. And at its peak, invisible from this angle, the spear pillar waited. They reached Celestic Town by late afternoon. Carolina met them at the door of her house with a stack of papers and an expression that suggested she'd slept even less than Cynthia. "The public briefing is prepared," she said without preamble. "Data compiled, presentation structured, talking points written. I've also received reports from the remaining seal sites. The Western Ridge seal is holding, your friend Brock found no evidence of tampering. The Northern and Snowpoint seals are unconfirmed. And the Pillar's base seal, she stopped. Looked at them both. Something shifted in her face. What? Cynthia asked. The Pillar's base seal was destroyed last night. Completely. There was an energy spike at approximately 2 in the morning, I have it on the monitoring equipment. The seal's signature flatlined. It's gone. Silence. Ash felt the news like a physical blow. 4 seals compromised out of 7. 3 remaining. And the creation trio's distress was visibly increasing. We're running out of time, he said. Yes, Carolina said. You are. The meeting with Tobias was set for midnight at Celestic's ancient shrine, a circular stone structure at the town center, older than anything else in the region, carved with symbols that depicted the creation trio in postures of both power and pain. Ash and Cynthia arrived early. The town was asleep around them, streets empty, windows dark. The shrine's stones caught the moonlight and held it, glowing faintly with an inner luminescence that had nothing to do with reflected light. Tobias emerged from the shadows at exactly midnight. He looked worse than the last time they'd seen him, paler, thinner, with a tension in his jaw that spoke of decisions being made and costs being counted. He wasn't armed. No pokeballs visible. His hands hung at his sides, empty and deliberately unthreatening. Thank you for coming, he said. Talk, Ash said. Tobias talked. The Pillars numbered approximately 30, trainers, scientists, and engineers, all recruited by Aldrich over the past decade. Most were true believers, drawn to Aldrich's ideology of liberating the creation trio. A handful were mercenaries, drawn by the promise of access to legendary tier technology. All were skilled. Some were dangerous. Aldrich's plan has 3 phases, Tobias said. Phase 1, destroy the seals. This is nearly complete. 4 of 7 seals are compromised. The remaining 3, Western Ridge, Northern, and Snowpoint, are targeted for simultaneous assault at the new moon. 9 days from now. Phase 2. Cynthia asked. Use amplified red chain technology to force the creation trio into manifestation at the spear pillar. Not to control them, to expose them. Strip away the dimensional barriers and force Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina to exist fully in our reality, where they'll be vulnerable. Vulnerable to what? Phase 3. A device Aldrich has been building for centuries, using distortion world energy and reverse-engineered ancient technology. He calls it the Unmaker. It's designed to sever the creation trio's connection to reality itself, to cut the threads that bind them to the dimensions they maintain. That would unravel everything, Cynthia said. Time, space, antimatter, the fundamental forces that hold reality together, would continue to exist, Tobias interrupted. That's Aldrich's theory. The creation trio maintain the boundaries between dimensions, but the dimensions themselves are self-sustaining. Remove the trio, and the boundaries dissolve, but reality persists, unified, unpartitioned, free. And if his theory is wrong? Tobias's jaw tightened. Then everything ends. The shrine stones hummed. In the moonlight, the carved images of Dialga and Palkia seemed to watch them, ancient eyes that had seen this conversation, or ones like it, before. There's something else, Tobias said. Something that makes this personal for Aldrich, beyond the ideology, beyond Sarah's death. What? The Covenant. Your Covenant. Aldrich doesn't fear it, he needs it. The Unmaker requires a resonance frequency that matches the creation trio's consciousness. 500 years ago, the only way to generate that frequency was through the Covenant's aura binding. Aldrich's covenant with Sarah produced it briefly, long enough for him to record the frequency before Sarah died. Ash felt cold. He recorded it. The recording degraded over time. The distortion world corrupted it beyond usability. Aldrich needs a fresh source. A new covenant, actively resonating at full power. He wanted us to invoke the covenant, Cynthia whispered. The sealed destruction, the dimensional crisis, it's not just preparation for the Unmaker. It's bait. He knew that if the world was threatened badly enough, someone would invoke the covenant to stop it. And he arranged for you to be the ones to do it, Tobias confirmed. Cynthia, the most powerful champion alive, who happened to be researching the covenant's history. Ash, the only known person with an aura frequency compatible with legendary tier resonance. He's been guiding you toward this for years. The information Carolina found in the deep ruins. Aldrich left it there for her to find. The world tilted. Ash felt it, not physically, but conceptually. Everything they'd done, every choice they'd made, recontextualized in an instant. Cynthia's research. The Master's 8. The Covenant's invocation. All of it, not their plan, but Aldrich's. He looked at Cynthia. She'd gone pale. The composure was still there, it was always there, but beneath it, he saw something he'd never seen before. Doubt. We played into his hands, she said. Everything. From the beginning. Not everything, Tobias said. The covenant's binding is real. Your auras are genuinely merging. The resonance you produced in Heart Home, that was authentic, not manufactured. Aldrich can use it, but he didn't create it. The connection between you is yours. Ash reached out and took Cynthia's hand. Not for the resonance. Not for the covenant. Because she looked like she was about to drown in her own guilt, and he wasn't going to let that happen. Cynthia. Look at me. She looked. We got played. Okay. It happens. It doesn't change what's real. The crisis is real. The covenant is real. What we felt in Heart Home, what I felt from you and what you felt from me, that's real. And no 500-year-old ghost manipulating us from inside a dimensional pocket changes that. He'll use us, Ash. The moment we complete the covenant at the pillar, he'll use our resonance to power the Unmaker. Then we make sure he can't. We change the equation. We go to the pillar on our terms, with allies, with preparation, and we complete the covenant in a way he hasn't planned for. How? Ash grinned. The reckless one. The one that preceded every impossible thing he'd ever done. I have absolutely no idea yet. But when has that ever stopped us? Cynthia stared at him. Then she squeezed his hand, hard, almost painfully, and something broke behind her eyes. Not composure. Something older. The belief that she had to carry everything alone. Us, she repeated. When did there become an us? Somewhere between Winden and that cavern, I think. Tobias watched this exchange with an expression that Ash couldn't fully read, part calculation, part something more human. Envy, maybe. Or recognition. I'll stay in contact, Tobias said. Encrypted channel. If Aldrich's timeline changes, you'll know immediately. And what about you? Ash asked. You're burning your bridges here. I burned them when I picked up the phone. There's no going back to the pillars after this. Aldrich will know I've turned. He always knows. Come with us. Tobias shook his head. I'm more useful as a free agent. There are pillars operatives I might be able to turn, others who join for the ideology, not the destruction. If I can reach them before the new moon. Be careful. I will be. He paused. Ash, when you face Aldrich, and you will, remember that he's not a monster. He's a man who loved someone more than life, lost her because the universe demanded a sacrifice he never agreed to, and spent 5 centuries trying to make the universe answer for it. I know. Do you? Because the temptation will be to fight him like a villain. And if you do that, you'll lose. Not the battle, the man. He can still be reached. I believe that. But only by someone who understands grief without judging it. Tobias turned and walked into the darkness between the shrine stones. For a moment, his silhouette was visible against the moonlit sky. Then the shadows took him, and he was gone. Ash and Cynthia stood in the ancient shrine, hands still linked, the weight of revelation pressing down on them like the mountain itself. 9 days, Cynthia said. 9 days. We need to get to the spear pillar before Aldrich does. We need to repair the seals first. Or at least protect the remaining 3. We can't do both simultaneously. Then we split our forces. Brock and Dawn on the seal sites, with whatever champion support arrives in time. You and me on the pillar. Cynthia nodded slowly. Then she looked at their joined hands. You're still holding my hand, she observed. Yeah. Is that a problem? No. She didn't let go. It's not. They stood there, in the moonlit shrine, at the center of a conspiracy 5 centuries in the making, holding hands like teenagers at a festival. The absurdity of it wasn't lost on either of them. Neither cared. Somewhere above them, the stars flickered. And inside the mountain, something ancient and broken began to move. The next 3 days were a controlled avalanche. Carolina released the public briefing. It hit the global news cycle like a meteor: scientific data on dimensional instability, historical context on the Covenant, and a statement from Champion Cynthia that was so precisely worded it left no room for misinterpretation. The world was facing a dimensional crisis. The Covenant was the response. And anyone who tried to obstruct it was obstructing the defense of reality itself. Cross tried to counter. He called it fear-mongering. He questioned the data. He trotted out League scientists who cast doubt on Carolina's methodology. But the heart-home footage was out there. Millions had watched 2 people stop a dimensional breach with their bare hands, and no amount of institutional messaging could unsee that. Public opinion swung. Not unanimously, it never is, but decisively. The narrative shifted from "rogue champion pulls bizarre stunt" to "2 heroes fighting to save the world." Cynthia's approval ratings in Sinnoh hit their highest point in a decade. Ash's face was on every magazine cover on the planet. Cross, reading the room, shifted strategies. He stopped opposing and started supporting, issuing League statements about coordinating with champion efforts, deploying resources to Sinnoh, and positioning himself as a partner rather than an obstacle. It was transparent to anyone paying attention, but it was also effective politics. He's going to claim credit, Cynthia said, reading Cross's latest press release. Let him, Ash replied. We need the resources he's sending. If he wants to take credit afterward, who cares? I care. He tried to stop us 3 days ago. And now he's helping. People change tactics. We adapt. She looked at him with an expression that mixed exasperation with something warmer. You're frustratingly pragmatic for someone who once challenged a legendary Pokémon to a fistfight. I was 12. I've matured. Debatable. Champions arrived. Stephen Stone came first, bringing a team of Hoenn Rangers trained in geological crisis response. Lance followed, with Kanto's Elite 4 in tow. Diantha came last. She'd been the most skeptical, but the heart-home footage convinced her. If this is real, she told Cynthia, then nothing else matters until it's resolved. You have Kalos's full support. It's real, Cynthia said. Then tell me where you need me. They deployed across Sinnoh. Stephen and Lance to the northern and Snowpoint seals. Diantha to the western ridge, backing up Brock. Dawn coordinated communication from Twinleaf, her Togekiss serving as an aerial relay between the scattered teams. Ash and Cynthia prepared for the pillar. They trained. Not apart, together. Their Pokémon sparred against each other in the fields outside Celestic, and the sessions were brutal, creative, and illuminating. Ash fought with instinct and improvisation, Cynthia fought with prediction and control. Separately, both styles were formidable. Together, they discovered something neither had anticipated. Their styles didn't clash. They complemented. Ash's chaos exploited the opening Cynthia's precision created. Cynthia's structure gave Ash's improvisation a framework to build from. When they fought side by side, his Pikachu and her Garchomp moving in concert, the result was something greater than the sum of its parts. "We're sinking," Cynthia said after a session that left both their teams exhausted. "It's the Covenant's influence. Our auras are learning each other's patterns. Is that the Covenant? Or is that just us?" She looked at him. Considered the question more seriously than he'd expected. "I don't know," she admitted. "And I'm not sure the distinction matters." On the evening of the 6th day, they sat on the roof of Carolina's house, watching the sun set behind Mount Coronet. The mountain was a black silhouette against the burning sky, and at its peak, visible now, unmistakable, the air twisted. A permanent distortion, like heat shimmer frozen in glass, marking the spear pillar's location. 3 days, Ash said. 3 days. He looked at her. The sunset painted her in shades of gold and shadow, and the ever-present weight she carried seemed lighter tonight, still there, but shared. "Cynthia. Whatever happens up there, at the pillar, I need you to know something." She turned to face him. The wind caught her hair. "I didn't agree to the Covenant because the world needed saving," he said. "I mean, that's part of it. But it's not why I said okay." "Then why?" He struggled for words. Ash Ketchum, who'd talked his way past legendaries and through dimensional rifts, struggled for words. "Because you looked at me," he said finally. "In the stadium. After the battle. And I saw someone who was scared of something bigger than herself and chose to face it anyway. That's the bravest thing I know. And I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to be the person who stood next to you." Cynthia's breath caught. She didn't speak for a long time. "Ash Ketchum," she said softly. "You are the most unexpectedly eloquent person I have ever met. I have my moments. You do." She reached out and brushed her fingers against his hand. Not taking it, just touching. "A question. You should know, whatever the Covenant created between us, the resonance, the binding, what I feel isn't the Covenant." "What is it?" She smiled. "The real one. The one that made the sunset irrelevant. Ask me again in a year." He laughed. She laughed. And on the roof of an old stone house, at the foot of a mountain where gods waited and monsters schemed, 2 people who'd been strangers 2 weeks ago sat side by side and watched the sky and felt, for the first time in both their lives, like the strongest person in the room wasn't alone anymore. Below them, Pikachu and Garchomp sat in the garden, sharing a bowl of berries. Garchomp was being surprisingly gentle with the portions. Pikachu was being surprisingly tolerant of the company. Some bonds, it seemed, transcended species. And above them, Mount Coronet waited. In 3 days, they would climb it. At its peak, they would speak the ancient words and bind their souls together in a ceremony that had killed the last woman brave enough to try it. And somewhere in the mountain's depths, a man who'd loved and lost and spent 5 centuries turning grief into a weapon would be waiting for them. Ash looked at the mountain. The distortion at its peak pulsed, faint, wrong, hungry. He wasn't afraid. He was ready. Chapter 3, The Crown. The mountain didn't want them there. Ash felt it from the first step onto Coronet's eastern trail, a pressure against his skin that had nothing to do with altitude or weather. The air itself resisted, thick with dimensional energy that made every breath taste like static. Pikachu's fur stood on end permanently, his cheeks crackling with involuntary discharge, and Lucario walked with his eyes half closed, navigating by aura rather than sight because the visual distortions on the trail made physical landmarks unreliable. Cynthia led. She'd climbed Coronet dozens of times, for research, for training, for the simple, stubborn need to stand at the roof of her region and remind herself what she was protecting. But she'd never climbed it like this. The trail markers she'd memorized were wrong. Not missing, moved. Stones that should have been on the left were on the right. A switchback that always turned north now turned east. The mountain's geometry was shifting, slowly and subtly, as if the distortion world's influence was rewriting the terrain in real time. "Stay close," she said over her shoulder. "If we get separated in a spatial distortion, we might not be on the same mountain anymore." "Encouraging," Ash said. They'd left Celestic Town before dawn, moving fast and light. The plan, such as it was, had been finalized the night before in Carolina's study, with input from every ally they had. It was simple in concept and terrifying in execution. Step 1, reach the spear pillar before Aldrich's forces. Step 2, complete the Covenant ceremony. Step 3, use the resonance to interface with the creation trio, stabilize the dimensional barriers, and deny Aldrich the frequency he needed for the Unmaker. Step 4, survive. Step 4 was the one nobody wanted to talk about in detail. The Allied champions were deployed across Sinnoh's SEAL network. Stephen and Lance held the northern SEAL, their combined firepower enough to deter anything short of a full pillar's assault. Diantha and Brock held the western ridge. Dawn coordinated from Twin Leaf, monitoring energy readings and maintaining communication between the scattered teams. The Snow Point SEAL was guarded by Iris and a contingent of Unova Rangers she'd personally recruited. She'd arrived 2 days ago, practically vibrating with determination, and told Ash, "You're not saving the world without me." That's not happening. Tobias was in the wind. His last encrypted message had been brief: 3 pillars operatives turned. 2 more considering. Aldrich knows I've defected. He doesn't care. He says I've served my purpose. That scares me more than anger would. The trail steepened. They climbed through cloud cover that felt wrong, too dense, too warm, with flickers of color inside it that weren't any shade clouds were supposed to be. Ash caught glimpses of shapes through the mist, structures that didn't exist on any map, buildings from somewhere else bleeding through the thinning barriers. "Don't look at them," Cynthia said sharply when he slowed to stare at what appeared to be a tower made of crystallized time, its surface showing 1,000 moments simultaneously. The bleed-through responds to attention. The more you focus on it, the more real it becomes. He looked away. The tower faded. But the impression stayed, a wrongness at the edge of perception, like a word on the tip of the tongue that your brain wouldn't let you say. 3 hours into the climb, Cynthia's scanner started screaming. Not the measured beeps of elevated readings. A continuous, shrill alarm that cut through the mountain wind like a blade. She pulled it from her belt, read the display, and her face went white. The northern SEAL just went down. Ash's stomach dropped. "Stephen and Lance, I'm calling them." She was already on the phone. It rang twice. 3 times. 4. Stephen answered. His voice was strained, breathless, backed by sounds of combat, explosions, roars, the crack of stone breaking. "We held them off for 6 hours, Stephen said. 12 operatives, coordinated assault, red chain disruptors on a scale we haven't seen before. Lance's Dragonite is down. My Metagross is barely standing. They broke through 20 minutes ago and planted charges on the SEAL before we could." The line cut. Static. Then nothing. Cynthia lowered the phone. Her hand was steady, but Ash could see the pulse hammering in her throat. 5 SEALs down, she said. 2 remaining. The Western Ridge and Snow Point. If they fall, they won't. Brock and Diantha. Iris. They'll hold. Against 12 coordinated operatives each. With red chain technology. They'll hold. Ash said it with a certainty he manufactured from nothing but will. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes you had to believe something into existence. Cynthia looked at him. Read his face. And chose, deliberately, to believe with him. Then we keep climbing, she said. They kept climbing. The terrain above the cloud line was alien. Rock formations twisted into shapes that violated basic geometry, arches that curved in directions that shouldn't exist, cliffs that were simultaneously vertical and horizontal depending on the angle you viewed them from. The dimensional barriers here weren't just thin, they were perforated. Reality had become a suggestion rather than a rule. Ash's aura was on fire. Not painfully, it was more like his entire body had become a tuning fork, vibrating at a frequency that intensified with every meter of altitude gained. Lucario walked beside him, and the Pokémon's aura blazed visible blue, reacting to the ambient energy. Even Pikachu felt it, his electricity had taken on a blue-white tinge that Ash had never seen before. The pillar's proximity is amplifying your aura, Cynthia said, watching him with scientific fascination overlaying personal concern. The spear pillar was built at the point where all three-dimensional planes intersect. It's the thinnest point in reality. Your aura is resonating with the dimensional frequency. It feels like my skin is too small. Poetic. Uncomfortable is what it is. They crested the final ridge at midday, and the spear pillar opened before them. Ash had been here before. Once, as a child, when Cyrus had torn the sky apart and he'd stood between gods and watched the universe nearly end. The memory was burned into him, the terror, the awe, the overwhelming smallness of being human in a place where divinity was real and angry. The pillar was different now. The ancient stone columns still stood, 6 of them, arranged in a circle around a central platform, carved with symbols that predated human language. But the spaces between the columns were filled with distortion. Vertical slashes in reality, shimmering with iridescent light, through which other worlds were visible, fragments of impossible landscapes, glimpses of time running backward, shadows that moved without objects to cast them. And at the center of it all, the platform. Smooth, dark stone, perfectly circular, 20 meters across. The place where the covenant ceremony would take place. The place where Sarah had died 500 years ago. It was empty. No pillars operatives. No Aldrich. No ambush. Ash didn't trust it for a second. He's letting us arrive, he said. Cynthia nodded slowly. He needs the covenant completed. He needs us to generate the resonance. Fighting us before the ceremony would be counterproductive. So he waits. Lets us do the work. Then takes what he needs. That's what I'd do. Remind me never to play chess with you. They approached the platform cautiously. Lucario ranged ahead, aura senses pushed to their maximum, scanning for traps, hidden devices, anything that didn't belong. He found nothing. The pillar was clean, ancient, humming with dimensional energy, but free of modern interference. Which meant Aldrich's play would come after the ceremony. During the resonance. When they were most vulnerable and most powerful simultaneously. Ash stood at the platform's edge and looked up. The sky above the spear pillar was fractured, a spiderweb of dimensional cracks radiating outward from a central point directly overhead. Through the cracks, he could see other skies, Dialga's realm of frozen time, Palkia's realm of infinite space, Giratina's realm of inverted physics. 3 worlds, pressing against the barriers, straining to break through. And in each world, something vast and desperate moved. The creation trio. Suffering. We do the ceremony now, Ash said. Before Aldrich makes his move. The ceremony takes time. The vows, the binding words, the aura synchronization, it's not instantaneous. How long? 20 minutes. Maybe 30. That's a long time to be exposed. I know. They looked at each other. The wind at the summit was cold and sharp, carrying the taste of dimensions that shouldn't touch. Then we'd better not waste any more time, Ash said. Cynthia pulled the ancient texts from her pack. Her hands were steady, champion's hands, battle-trained, immune to the tremor that fear would produce in lesser composure. But Ash saw her eyes, and in them was something raw and unguarded. Ash. Before we start. There's something I need to say. Okay. If this goes wrong, if the strain is too much and one of us doesn't, she stopped. Reset. This was the hardest sentence she'd ever tried to construct. If I don't survive this, I need you to know that invoking the covenant was the best decision I ever made. Not because it might save the world. Because it brought me to you. The words hung in the mountain air, more real than the stone beneath their feet. Ash stepped closer. Close enough that the wind couldn't get between them. You're going to survive this, he said. We both are. Because I didn't come all this way to lose you before I've even figured out what we are. And what are we? He thought about press conferences and ancient ruins and firelit conversations and holding her hand while reality tore itself apart. He thought about the way she laughed when she forgot to be composed, and the way she fought like every battle was a theorem being proven, and the way she'd carried an impossible burden alone for 2 years because she didn't know how to ask for help. We're a beginning, he said. And beginnings don't end on chapter 1. She looked at him for a long, suspended moment. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a gesture so intimate and so unexpected that Ash's heart stopped. Don't die, she whispered. Same to you. She pulled back. Opened the texts. And the ceremony began. The ancient language fell from Cynthia's lips like water, fluid, musical, weighted with centuries of meaning. She spoke the framework words, the structure that defined the covenant's parameters, the invocation of binding, the acknowledgement of permanence. Each phrase resonated with the pillar's stone, and the columns began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter, responding to language they'd been built to receive. Ash's part came next. The spontaneous words, the binding that had to come from the heart, unscripted, in whatever language the soul spoke. He didn't speak ancient Sinnoh. He didn't try. I choose you, he said. Simple. Direct. The most honest 3 words he'd ever spoken. Not because the world needs saving. Not because fate or prophecy or some ancient law says I should. I choose you because you're brilliant and brave and you scare me and you make me better and I can't imagine facing anything without you beside me. The columns blazed. The dimensional cracks overhead pulsed. And Ash felt the covenant activate. It was nothing like the partial synchronization they'd experienced before. That had been a candle flame. This was a bonfire. His aura erupted from his body, not gradually, not gently, but with the force of a dam breaking. Blue-white energy poured outward and crashed into Cynthia's aura, which blazed gold, and the 2 forces didn't collide, they wove. Threads of blue and gold spiraling together, intertwining, becoming something that was neither his nor hers but theirs, completely and irrevocably. He felt her. All of her. Not thoughts, emotions. The deep structure of who she was. Her love for Garchomp, fierce and unconditional. Her respect for her grandmother, complicated by a lifetime of never being soft enough for each other. Her dedication to Sinnoh, so total it had consumed everything else until there was nothing left for herself. And her feelings for him. Not a tidy, categorizable emotion, something messier, more honest. Admiration that had grown into trust, that had grown into need, that had grown into something she didn't have a word for yet but felt like standing in sunlight after years underground. She felt him back. He knew because the resonance was mutual, two-way, equal, a feedback loop of raw emotional truth. She felt his stubbornness and his compassion and his impossible optimism and the fear he hid beneath it, the small voice that whispered, "What if I'm not enough?" every time the stakes got this high. And she answered it. Not with words. With certainty. You are enough. You have always been enough. The resonance built. The pillars' columns were white-hot now, blazing with combined aura, and above them, the dimensional cracks widened, not breaking, but opening. Controlled. Deliberate. Doorways rather than wounds. Through the doorways, the creation trio appeared. Dialga first, massive, armored in temporal steel, its diamond-shaped chest plate pulsing with the rhythm of time itself. It materialized in the air above the pillar, and its presence was like standing in a river of moments, past and future flowing around them simultaneously. Palkia next, sleek, pearl-white, its spatial blade arms cutting reality as it moved. Space bent around it, distances becoming meaningless, the mountain simultaneously vast and small. And Giratina, erupting from a portal beneath the platform itself, its serpentine form coiling around the columns, 6 golden wings spread wide, the lord of antimatter and opposition and everything that existed in the spaces between things. 3 gods. Visible, present, real. And in agony. Ash could feel it through the resonance, their pain, transmitted through the Covenant's frequency. The dimensional barriers they maintained were failing, compromised by the destroyed seals, and the effort of holding reality together without them was tearing the trio apart from the inside. They were dying. Slowly, invisibly, in a way that no one on the surface would notice until it was far too late. He reached out through the resonance. The same way he'd reached Giratina in Heart Home, but stronger now, amplified by the completed Covenant. Not commanding. Asking. We're here. We're connected. Let us help. The response was overwhelming. 3 vast consciousnesses turned their attention to the tiny spark of human awareness that had touched them, and the weight of it nearly crushed Ash flat. His knees buckled. Blood dripped from his nose. Beside him, Cynthia gasped, her hands flying to her temples as the pressure hit her too. But they held. Together. Their merged aura absorbed the impact, distributed the strain, bent without breaking. "We hear you," came the response, not words, but impressions, understanding flowing directly into their minds. The anchors fail. The barriers decay. We cannot hold. We are breaking. We know, Ash sent. We'll fix it. Just hold on a little longer. How long? Long enough. A rumble from the mountain. Not an earthquake, something larger, deeper, more deliberate. The rock beneath the pillar shuddered, and from the tunnels that led into Coronet's interior, light blazed, wrong light, iridescent and shifting, the signature of the distortion world. Aldrich was coming. They heard him before they saw him. Not footsteps, a sound like reality tearing at the seams, a sustained ripping noise that made the air vibrate and the stone crack. The light from the tunnels intensified, and shadows pooled around the pillar's base, thick and liquid and moving with purpose. He emerged from the mountain's throat like a specter. Aldrich was tall, taller than he'd looked on the ancient illustrations, as if the distortion world had stretched him slightly beyond human proportions. His features were sharp and angular, handsome in a way that was difficult to look at directly, like a blade held edge-on. His eyes, that wrong, iridescent gray-violet, swept the pillar with an intensity that compressed the air. He wore no coat, no armor, nothing that suggested preparation for combat. His clothes were simple, dark fabric, unadorned, the kind of garments that had been old 5 centuries ago. But around him, reality bent. Shadows clung to his legs like obedient animals. The dimensional distortions that warped the pillar's surroundings seemed to straighten in his presence, as if even chaos deferred to him. Behind him, they came. Pillar's operatives, 15, 20, more, fanning out across the mountain's upper slopes, each with Pokémon already deployed. Ash recognized modified technology on several, devices strapped to their arms and backs, pulsing with red chain energy. And behind them all, visible in the tunnel's mouth, something massive and mechanical. The Unmaker. A structure of dark metal and crystallized dimensional energy, mounted on a platform that Macamp and Conkeldurr were pushing up the slope. It looked like a weapon designed by someone who understood physics on a level that made current science look like finger painting, all angles and impossible geometries, with a core that throbbed with visible power. Aldrich stopped at the platform's edge. 30 meters from where Ash and Cynthia stood, Covenant resonance still blazing around them, the creation trio manifested overhead. He looked up at the gods. And the expression on his face was not triumph. It was grief. 500 years, he said. His voice carried across the pillar with unnatural clarity, not shouted, not amplified, just present, the way a mountain is present. 500 years I've waited for this moment. And here you are, Dialga. Palkia. Giratina. Still suffering. Still bound. Still holding up a sky that doesn't deserve you. He lowered his gaze to Ash and Cynthia. And here you are, he said, quieter. The new sacrifice. The new offering to gods who take and never give back. We're not sacrifices, Ash said. His voice was steady. The Covenant's resonance burned through him, and it took everything he had to speak normally while interfacing with three divine consciousnesses simultaneously. We chose this. So did Sarah. The name fell from Aldrich's lips like a stone into deep water. She chose. She believed. She thought her love and her courage would be enough to bridge the gap between mortal and divine. And the gods drank her dry and didn't even notice her passing. That's not what happened, Cynthia said. The seals were weakened. The energy was unregulated. She died because the system failed, not because the gods killed her. The system exists to serve the gods. The seals, the barriers, the entire architecture, all of it designed to keep three creatures comfortable in their cosmic roles while the rest of us live and die beneath them. Sarah died because the system demanded a human sacrifice to maintain divine status quo. And I am done, watching that system consume people. He stopped. His jaw worked. The iridescent eyes glistened. People I love, he finished. Silence, except for the hum of the resonance and the distant sound of dimensional energy crackling through the pillar's columns. Ash felt something through the Covenant, Cynthia's reaction to Aldrich's words. Not just empathy. Recognition. She'd carried the same fear for months, that the Covenant would demand her life, or ashes, and that the sacrifice would mean nothing to the gods it served. The difference was that Cynthia had found someone worth risking it with. Aldrich had found someone and lost her. I understand, Ash said. Aldrich's expression shifted. Surprise, faint but real. You understand, he repeated flatly. I understand losing someone. I understand wanting the universe to answer for it. I understand the rage of watching the powerful take from the powerless and calling it necessity. Ash stepped forward. One step. Cynthia's hand tightened on his, and through the Covenant, he felt her alarm, don't get closer, but also her trust. But you're wrong about what the creation trio are. They're not indifferent. They're not uncaring. They're in pain, Aldrich. Right now, right here, I can feel them dying. Good. The word was soft, terrible, loaded with 5 centuries of compressed fury. Let them die. Let the barriers fall. Let the universe rebuild itself without jailers and prisoners and sacrificial systems that eat the people who love the hardest. And if the universe doesn't rebuild? If it just ends? Then at least it ends honest. Aldrich raised his hand. The Unmaker responded, its core brightened, energy patterns shifting, orienting toward the creation trio overhead. The operatives around the pillar moved into formation, their devices activating, creating a network of red chain energy that connected to the Unmaker's systems. I don't need to fight you, Aldrich said. The Unmaker only needs your resonance frequency. You've already provided it, the Covenant is complete, the frequency is radiating from you like a beacon. All I have to do is capture it. The Unmaker's core pulsed. A beam of dark energy lanced upward, not at the creation trio but at the Covenant's resonance field, the merged aura blazing between Ash and Cynthia. The beam hit the field and refracted, splitting into spectral components, and the Unmaker began to absorb. Drawing the frequency in, recording it, amplifying it. Ash felt it like a hand reaching into his chest. The resonance wavered, distorted, pulled in a direction it wasn't meant to go. Cynthia gasped beside him, and through the Covenant he felt her pain, the binding that connected them being stretched, twisted, used as a conduit for something destructive. Above them, the creation trio screamed. Not a sound. A feeling, three gods crying out in simultaneous agony as the Unmaker locked onto their frequency through the Covenant's hijacked resonance. Dialga's temporal field stuttered, and for a terrifying second, time on the mountaintop ran backward. Palkia's spatial presence contracted, distances snapping like rubber bands. Giratina thrashed, its form flickering between solid and shadow. Stop it! Ash shouted. I can't, Aldrich said. And I won't. This is what mercy looks like. Ending 500 years of slavery. Ash's vision blurred. The strain of the hijacked resonance was enormous, like being pulled in two directions at once. His aura stretched between the Covenant's natural bond and the Unmaker's parasitic draw. He felt his strength draining, felt Cynthia's strength draining, felt the shared vitality pool that Carolina had warned them about being consumed by the machine's hunger. This was how Sarah had died. Not from the gods. From the system being overwhelmed, too much energy, too much demand, too little capacity to survive it. He wasn't going to let it happen again. Pikachu. Ash's voice cracked like a whip. Thunderbolt, the Unmaker's core. Pikachu launched from Ash's shoulder with a cry that split the air. The thunderbolt was massive, not just Pikachu's power but Ash's aura behind it, channeled through their bond, amplified by the Covenant's resonance. It hit the Unmaker's core dead center. The machine shuddered. The absorption beam flickered. For a moment, the pressure on Ash and Cynthia eased. Aldrich's expression didn't change. He nodded to his operatives, and the battle erupted. 15 Pillars trainers, coordinated, armed with red chain-enhanced Pokémon, descending on the spear pillar from every direction. The ancient columns became cover. The platform became a battlefield. And the dimensional cracks overhead widened with every impact, reality fraying at the edges. Ash didn't have time to think. He acted. Lucario, hold the left flank. Gengar, disruption, keep them off balance. Dragonite, I need air superiority, clear anyone approaching the platform. Surfetched, with me. His team deployed with the precision of soldiers who trained for exactly this kind of chaos. Lucario's aura spheres rained down on the approaching operatives, each one targeted with the accuracy of a guided missile. Gengar phased through the stone columns, appearing behind enemy lines to launch shadow balls that scattered formations. Dragonite roared into the sky, its hurricane attacks creating barriers of wind that deflected incoming assaults. Cynthia fought beside him. Not behind him, not separate from him, beside him, their movements synchronized by the Covenant's bond. Her Garchomp erupted from its ball with a roar that shook the mountain, and together the two powerhouses carved through the advancing operatives like a blade through silk. Dragon Claw, the left group. Cynthia called. Garchomp lunged. 3 Pillars Pokémon went down in a single sweeping strike. A Weevil tried to flank, and Surfetched was there, Leak Lance flashing, Meteor Assault hitting with the force of a freight train. But the operatives kept coming. And the Unmaker was still operating, its core damaged but not destroyed, the absorption beam reasserting itself with every passing second. Through the chaos, Ash felt the creation trio's agony intensifying. The Unmaker was working. Slowly, brutally, but it was working. The hijacked resonance was eating through the bonds that connected the creation trio to the dimensional architecture. Thread by thread, the fabric of reality was being severed. He needed to shut the Unmaker down. But Aldrich stood between him and the machine, and Aldrich hadn't moved. He watched the battle with the patience of someone who'd waited 5 centuries and could wait a few more minutes. Then help arrived. Ash heard it before he saw it, a roar that he recognized in his bones, the sound of a Charizard pushing its limits, and Leon's voice carrying across the mountain like a battle horn. Sorry we're late. Leon's Charizard blazed across the sky, Gigantamax energy trailing from its wings. Behind it, more shapes. Steven's Metagross, battered but airborne. Lance's second Dragonite. Diantha's Gardevoir, teleporting in flashes of pink light. The champions had come. Not just the ones who'd been guarding the seals. All of them. Every champion who'd answered the call, converging on the spear pillar in a display of coordinated power that made the pillar's operatives falter. The seals. Ash shouted as Leon's Charizard touched down on the platform. Held. All of them. Leon vaulted from Charizard's back, cape billowing, grin blazing. Iris and Brock are maintaining position. Steven rallied after the northern seal fell and counterattacked. Diantha never even let them get close to the western ridge. He looked at the chaos around the pillar, the operatives, the Unmaker, the fractured sky, and his grin sharpened into something harder. Right. Where do you need me? The operatives. All of them. Clear the field. I need a path to that machine. Leon didn't hesitate. He turned, Charizard reared, and they plunged into the fight with the unstoppable force of the world's reigning monarch. Steven's Metagross crashed into the pillar's eastern flank, Meteor Mash scattering pillar's Pokémon like pins. Lance's Dragonite swept the northern approach, Hyper Beams turning stone to slag. Diantha's Gardevoir created barriers of psychic energy that cut the operatives' formation in half, isolating groups for the other champions to dismantle. The tide turned. The pillar's operatives, skilled as they were facing 5 champions simultaneously. It wasn't a battle, it was a rout. But the Unmaker was still running. And Aldrich was still standing. Ash disengaged from the wider fight. He recalled Gengar, Dragonite, and Surfetch'd, they'd done their job. He kept Lucario at his side and Pikachu on his shoulder, and he walked toward Aldrich. Not ran. Walked. The ancient champion watched him approach with those wrong-colored eyes. The battle raged around them, but between them, a pocket of stillness formed, 2 auras pressing against each other, creating a space where the chaos couldn't reach. Your friends are impressive, Aldrich said. But they're fighting my soldiers, not my purpose. The Unmaker is automated. It doesn't need my operatives to function. It only needs your resonance, and you're still providing it. He was right. The Covenant's resonance was still being siphoned, and as long as it was active, the Unmaker would continue its work. Then we have a problem, Ash said. Because I'm not shutting down the Covenant. And you're not shutting down the machine. No. So we settle it the old way. Aldrich tilted his head. A battle. A battle. Something shifted in Aldrich's expression. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of one, the memory of a time when battles were simple, when 2 trainers faced each other and the stronger one walked away, and the world made sense. I haven't battled in 500 years, he said. Then you're due. Aldrich reached into the shadows that clung to his body and drew out a pokeball. It was ancient, carved from dark stone rather than manufactured, its surface covered in the same symbols that adorned the pillar's columns. When he pressed its release, the energy that emerged was wrong, twisted, iridescent, carrying the taint of centuries in the distortion world. The Pokémon that materialized was a Spiritome. But not any Spiritome Ash had ever seen or imagined. This one was massive, 3 times normal size, its keystone cracked and leaking purple energy, the 108 spirits within it visible as individual points of ghostly light orbiting the core. It had been warped by 5 centuries of distortion world exposure, its form partially phased between dimensions, existing in multiple realities simultaneously. Looking at it hurt, not Ash's eyes, but his aura, which recoiled from the thing's wrongness. Sarah's Spiritome, Aldrich said quietly. The only Pokémon that survived the first Covenant. It followed me into the distortion world. It's been my companion for 500 years. It's the only living thing that remembers her. The Spiritome's ghostly lights flickered. Through the Covenant's resonance, Ash caught a fragment of its emotional state, not just rage or corruption, but grief. Ancient, bottomless grief. The 108 spirits within it had absorbed Aldrich's pain, magnified it, fed on it, until grief was all they were. It was the saddest thing Ash had ever felt. "Pikachu," he said. "This is it, buddy." Pikachu jumped from his shoulder. He landed on the stone platform and faced the distortion-warped Spiritome, and his body language was different from any battle Ash had seen. Not aggressive. Not defensive. Resolute. Like a soldier who understood the cost of what was coming and accepted it. "Dark Pulse," Aldrich said. The attack came from everywhere. Spiritome didn't launch it, it became it. The ghostly lights expanded outward in a sphere of corrupted energy, and the dark pulse wasn't just power, it was emotion. 5 centuries of grief compressed into a single assault, hitting not just the body but the soul. "Pikachu, Electroweb, surround yourself." Pikachu wove a cocoon of electrical energy around his body half a second before the dark pulse hit. The web absorbed the physical component, but the emotional shockwave passed through, and Pikachu staggered, his eyes going wide with borrowed pain. "Shake it off." Quick attack, circle pattern. Pikachu moved. Fast, faster than he'd ever moved, a yellow blur tracing a circle around Spiritome. The ghost tracked him with its orbiting lights, but Pikachu was changing direction too quickly, too unpredictably, and the Spiritome's targeting couldn't keep up. Iron Tail. Pikachu struck the keystone. The impact rang like a bell, and the Spiritome shrieked, all 108 voices at once, a sound that existed in frequencies human ears weren't designed to process. The ghostly lights scattered, reformed, and Spiritome lunged with Shadow Ball. Dodge, Thunderbolt, full power. Pikachu sidestepped the Shadow Ball by millimeters and unleashed. The Thunderbolt was enormous, not just Pikachu's power but Ash's aura feeding into it through their bond, the Covenant's resonance adding another layer, until the bolt of electricity was blue-white and burning with combined force. It hit Spiritome directly. The ghost convulsed, its form destabilizing, the 108 lights scattering like startled butterfree. For a moment, Ash thought it was over. Then the lights regrouped. Spiritome reformed. Bigger. Angrier. The distortion world energy crackling around it intensified, and the platform beneath it cracked in spiderweb patterns. "Hypnosis," Aldrich said. The attack was invisible, a wave of psychic force that targeted consciousness itself. Pikachu's eyes glazed. His legs buckled. He was going down, Pikachu. Remember Kanto. It wasn't a command. It was an invocation. Every battle, every loss, every victory, every rainstorm and every sunrise, from the first day they'd met, a terrified boy and a disobedient mouse who'd decided, against all odds, to trust each other. Pikachu's eyes cleared. He snarled, and the hypnosis shattered like glass. Aldrich blinked. For the first time, genuine surprise crossed his face. "Impressive," he said. "But insufficient." "Ominous wind," Aldrich commanded. Spiritome unleashed a storm. Not a localized attack but a sustained assault, winds of ghostly energy sweeping across the entire platform, carrying fragments of distortion, shards of other realities, the detritus of dimensional breakdown. The wind tore at Pikachu's fur, at Ash's clothes, at the ancient columns. And inside the wind, voices. The 108 spirits, speaking all at once, in fragments of words from a language Ash almost recognized, "Help us. Free us. We are tired. We are so tired." Ash heard them. Through the Covenant's resonance, through his aura, he heard the Spiritome's component spirits, not as enemies, but as prisoners. Trapped in the keystone for crimes committed millennia ago, bound and tormented, their grief compounded by Aldrich's own until they become a feedback loop of suffering. "They want out," Ash whispered. "What?" Cynthia was beside him, she'd fought her way through the last of the operatives and joined him at the platform center, Garchomp guarding their flank. "The spirits in the Spiritome. They're not fighting for Aldrich. They're fighting because they don't know how to do anything else. They've been in pain for so long that pain is all they remember." He looked at Aldrich. The ancient champion's face was stone, but his eyes, those wrong, iridescent eyes, were wet. You know, Ash said. You've known all along. That's why you kept Spiritome with you. Not as a weapon. As a memorial. Because its pain is Sarah's pain, and letting go of it means letting go of her. Aldrich's composure cracked. Not dramatically, a fracture, a shift in the stone of his expression that revealed the volcanic grief beneath. Don't, he said. Don't pretend you understand. I'm not pretending. I felt it. Through the covenant. Your frequency, your love, it's the same frequency as the resonance. That's why the covenant works for you. That's why it worked for Sarah. The binding isn't powered by aura or combat or ancient words. It's powered by love. And you've been carrying yours for 500 years, and it's eating you alive. The ominous wind died. Spiritome hovered, its lights flickering uncertainly, responding not to Aldrich's commands but to his emotional state, which had shifted from controlled fury to something more volatile and more vulnerable. Pikachu, Ash said quietly. Stand down. Pikachu looked at him. Ash met his partner's gaze and nodded. Pikachu hesitated, every instinct screaming against lowering his guard in front of a hostile, and then, because he trusted Ash more than he trusted instinct, he sat down. The battlefield went still. The champions had finished with the operatives, unconscious bodies and recalled Pokémon littered the mountain slopes. Leon stood at the platform's edge, Charizard at his back, watching the confrontation with sharp eyes. Steven and Lance flanked the Unmaker, ready to destroy it on Ash's signal. Diantha maintained a psychic barrier around the perimeter. But none of them moved. Because the fight had shifted from combat to something else entirely, and they all knew it. Ash walked toward Aldrich. What are you doing? Cynthia hissed behind him. He didn't answer. He walked across the cracked platform, past the hovering Spiritome, until he stood 3 paces from the man who'd orchestrated the near destruction of reality. Aldrich could have attacked. A gesture, a word, and Spiritome would have ended it. His hand twitched, 500 years of survival instinct demanding action. He didn't move. Tell me about her, Ash said. Aldrich stared at him. What? Sarah. Tell me about her. Not the covenant. Not the sacrifice. Her. Who was she? The question was so unexpected, so fundamentally off-script from everything Aldrich had prepared for, that it bypassed every defense he'd built. She was. His voice broke. He paused. Started again. She was stubborn. More stubborn than you, which I wouldn't have thought possible. She argued with me about everything, tactics, philosophy, what to eat for dinner. She had a toadkiss that was as stubborn as she was, and the two of them would gang up on me when they thought I was being unreasonable, which was often. He was smiling. He didn't seem to realize it. She sang. Off-key, always, but she didn't care. She said singing was about joy, not accuracy, and anyone who criticized her singing was missing the point. The smile faltered. She sang the morning of the ceremony. While she was getting ready. I can still hear it. Ash said nothing. He let the words come. When the resonance overwhelmed her, when I felt her slipping away through the bond, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She looked at me and she said, "It's okay. The world is worth it." And then she was gone. Aldrich's voice had dropped to nearly nothing. The mountain wind carried it away as fast as he produced it, and Ash had to lean forward to hear. She was wrong, Aldrich whispered. The world isn't worth it. No world is worth the price she paid. And every day I've existed since, I've been trying to build a reality where no one ever has to pay it again. By killing the gods who demanded the payment. Yes. And if killing the gods kills everyone else, then everyone else will be free. Free from a universe that runs on sacrifice and calls it sacred. Ash took a breath. The deepest breath of his life. Aldrich. The gods didn't kill Sarah. Don't, the system failed. The seals were weak. The energy was unregulated. But the creation trio didn't take her life. I can feel them right now, through the covenant, and what I feel is beings who are as trapped as Sarah was. They don't want to be gods. They didn't choose this any more than she did. They're holding reality together because if they stop, everything dies, and they can't live with that. They're prisoners too. You can't know that. I can. That's what the covenant does. Not commands. Not weapons. Connection. I can feel what they feel, and what they feel is exactly what you feel. Grief. Duty. The weight of carrying something too heavy for too long with no one to help. The silence that followed was the loudest thing on the mountain. Above them, the creation trio hovered. Dialga's temporal field had stabilized slightly, the time distortions on the platform had ceased. Palkia's spatial presence had calmed, distances returning to normal. Giratina's form had steadied, its golden wings spread wide, its ancient eyes fixed on the man who'd been its prisoner and its guest for 500 years. Aldrich looked up at Giratina. The god of the distortion world looked down at him. And through the covenant, Ash felt what passed between them. Not words. Not language. Something older and simpler. Giratina, reaching out to the man who'd wandered its realm for centuries, who'd raged and wept and built machines to destroy it, and offering something that Aldrich had never, in 500 years, expected to receive from a god. Compassion. I watched you grieve. I heard you call her name. I am not what you think I am. I am not your enemy. I am sorry for your pain. Aldrich's knees gave way. He dropped to the stone platform, not falling, but folding, as if the structure that had held him upright for centuries simply ceased to function. The iridescent eyes overflowed, and the tears that ran down his face carried a faint luminescence, the distortion world's mark, even in his grief. 500 years, he said. 500 years and you could have, why didn't you tell me? The answer came through the resonance. Not from Giratina, but from the space between God and man. You couldn't hear. Your grief was too loud. We are sorry. We are so sorry. Spiritome's lights flickered. The 108 spirits within the keystone felt their masters collapse, felt the grief transmute, not disappearing, but shifting, changing from rage to something older and more terrible, acceptance. And the spirits responded. Their orbiting lights slowed. The hostile energy dissipated. One by one, the ghostly flames dimmed, and the massive, warped spiritome began to shrink, returning to its natural size, shedding the distortion world's corruption like a snake shedding skin. The keystone landed on the platform with a soft clack. The lights faded to gentle, warm points, no longer burning with borrowed fury. The spiritome was at peace. And Aldrich was on his knees, face in his hands, 5 centuries of grief pouring out of him like water from a broken dam. Ash stood over him. Not in triumph. Not in judgment. He reached down and put his hand on Aldrich's shoulder. It's over, he said. Aldrich looked up. His face was devastated, not destroyed, but broken and beginning, somehow, to rebuild. The Unmaker, Stephen, Ash called. Stephen Stone didn't need to be told twice. His metagross hit the Unmaker with a meteor mash that shattered its core like an eggshell. The machine's energy field collapsed, the absorption beam died, and the hijacked resonance snapped back to Ash and Cynthia like a rubber band, making both of them stagger. The Unmaker fell. Collapsed into inert metal and dead crystal, smoking on the mountainside. 5 centuries of obsessive engineering, reduced to scrap in a single blow. Aldrich watched it fall. Ash expected devastation. Instead, the ancient champion's expression held something that looked almost like relief. It's over, Aldrich echoed. And meant it. Cynthia was at Ash's side now. She looked at Aldrich, this broken, ancient man who'd nearly destroyed reality because he couldn't stop loving a woman who'd been dead for 500 years, and her eyes were bright. "The Covenant shares life force," she said quietly. "You know that better than anyone. You felt Sarah leave, and you survived. Barely. But you survived. Because the Covenant didn't kill her, Aldrich. The circumstances did, the damaged seals, the unregulated energy. Under different conditions, with proper support, Sarah would have lived." Aldrich looked at her. At the resonance still blazing between her and Ash. At the completed Covenant, alive and burning, two auras woven together into something stronger than either alone. "You believe that," he said. "I know it. Because we're standing here. Both of us. Alive. And the Covenant is holding." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the iridescent wrong color was fading, slowly, like a stain being washed away, replaced by the natural brown they must have been 500 years ago. "Sarah," he whispered. "Not to them. To the air. To the memory. To the woman who'd sung off-key on the morning of her death and told him the world was worth it." Giratina descended. Its massive form coiled down from the fractured sky, golden wings folding, until its ancient face was level with Aldrich's. The god of antimatter, of opposition, of everything that existed between things, the being that had watched this man rage through its realm for centuries, lowered its head. An invitation. Not to imprisonment. Not to punishment. To rest. Aldrich reached out. His fingers touched Giratina's face, and the contact produced a shimmer of energy, not destructive, not dimensional, just warm. The warmth of two beings who'd shared a space for 500 years and finally, at the end, understood each other. "I'm tired," Aldrich said. "I know," Giratina answered. "Come. There is peace, where I can take you." She is not there. But the pain can end. Aldrich stood. He was smaller now, not physically, but in presence. The weight of purpose that had sustained him was gone, and without it, he was just a man. Old. Exhausted. Done. He turned to Ash. "Take care of the Covenant," he said. "It's the most important thing in the world. Not because of what it does. Because of what it means. Someone loved someone else enough to bind their souls together. Don't ever let that become a weapon." "I won't," Ash said. Aldrich nodded. Then he looked at Cynthia. "She would have liked you," he said. "Sarah. She would have called you too serious and dragged you to a festival and made you dance even though you'd be terrible at it." Cynthia's composure finally broke. Not into tears, into a laugh, startled and genuine and heartbroken all at once. "I would have let her," she said. Aldrich almost smiled. Then he turned to Giratina, and the god opened a portal, not a violent tear in reality, but a gentle opening, a doorway into a dimension that looked, for the first time, not like a prison but like a sanctuary. Aldrich walked through it. The portal closed behind him. And the spear pillar was still. Above them, the creation trio remained. Dialga, Palkia, Giratina, returned from its portal, hovering over the platform, their agony fading as the Unmaker's influence died and the Covenant's true resonance, uncorrupted, unhijacked, washed over them like a healing tide. Ash felt it. The resonance, freed from the machine's parasitic draw, expanding outward through the dimensional architecture. Reaching the remaining seals, strengthening them. Touching the damaged sites, beginning the slow process of repair. Flowing through the barriers between worlds, reinforcing them, stabilizing them, giving the creation trio the support they'd been dying for. The cracks in the sky began to close. Slowly, like wounds healing in reverse, the dimensional fractures sealed themselves. The wrong light faded. The alien geometry straightened. The stars, visible even in daylight at this altitude, snapped back to their proper positions, and the sky became sky again, blue and deep and ordinary and beautiful. Dialga roared. Not in pain, in release. The sound echoed across Sinnoh, and every person, every Pokemon, every living thing on the continent looked up and felt it, the world settling back into itself, the fever breaking, the crisis passing like a storm clearing to reveal the sun. Palkia sang, a sound like the distance between stars, impossibly vast and impossibly gentle. Space relaxed, distances becoming fixed again, the world regaining its proper shape. Giratina coiled through the air above the pillar one final time, its golden wings catching the light, and then descended through a portal of its own, back to the distortion world, back to its domain, but this time by choice. Not imprisoned. Choosing. The creation trio departed. The sky was clear. The spear pillar stood, ancient and scarred and enduring, and the columns' glow faded to their natural state, faint, warm, content. Ash's legs gave out. He went down hard, sitting heavily on the stone platform, and the Covenant's resonance dimmed, not dying, but settling, finding its resting state now that the crisis had passed. The overwhelming flood of sensation reduced to a quiet hum, a constant awareness of Cynthia's presence that felt less like a supernatural bond and more like a natural extension of his own consciousness. Cynthia sat down beside him. She didn't collapse, she was too dignified for that, but she sat with the deliberate care of someone whose body had been pushed past its limits and was only now admitting it. Pikachu climbed into Ash's lap, curled up, and fell asleep instantly. Just like that. Crisis over, nap time. Lucario sat behind them, silent sentinel, his aura dimmed to a faint shimmer. The battle was done. His trainer was safe. That was sufficient. Leon walked over. His cape was torn, his hair was a disaster, and he was grinning like a man who just had the best day of his life. Well, he said. That was something. Ash looked up at him. Thanks for coming. Mate, I wouldn't have missed that for the world. Literally. Since the world was at stake and all. He crouched down to Ash's level. You alright? Yeah. Tired. Really tired. You just saved reality. I think you've earned a nap. Leon clapped him on the shoulder and stood. I'll handle the cleanup. You two stay here. He walked off, already organizing the other champions with the effortless authority of someone born to lead. Steven and Lance were securing the unconscious pillar's operatives. Diantha was doing something with her Gardevoir that created a protective psychic bubble around the pillar, gentle, stabilizing, giving the ancient structure time to recover. Ash and Cynthia sat on the stone where gods had stood, at the peak of the world, and said nothing for a long time. The sun was setting. After everything, the climb, the battle, the confrontation, the covenant, the sun was setting, and the sky was putting on a show. Oranges and pinks and deep purples, layered across the horizon, the kind of sunset that made you think the universe was showing off on purpose. Ask me, Cynthia said. Ash turned his head. She was watching the sunset, her profile sharp against the fading light, and she was smiling, not the champion's smile, not the composed smile, not even the surprised real smile he'd been cataloging. Something new. Something settled. Something that looked like it intended to stay. Ask you what? The question the reporter asked. In Winden. You said, ask me in a year. He remembered. The press conference. A lifetime ago. A different Ash and a different Cynthia, standing behind podiums, managing a narrative. It hasn't been a year, he said. I know. Ask me anyway. He looked at her. At the woman who'd gambled everything, her reputation, her career, her life, on an ancient covenant and a trainer she barely knew. Who'd carried a world-ending secret alone for 2 years because she didn't know how to ask for help. Who'd fought beside him, argued with him, laughed with him, held his hand while reality collapsed, and chosen him, not because fate demanded it, but because she wanted to. Are you in love with me? He asked. Yes, she said. No hesitation. No calculation. No strategic deployment of information. Just the word, simple and complete. Good, Ash said. Because I'm in love with you, and it would have been really awkward otherwise. She laughed. The best one yet, full, warm, the sound of a woman who'd remembered how to be happy. He kissed her. Not dramatically. Not cinematically. Just leaned over and kissed her, gently, on a mountaintop at sunset, with Pikachu asleep in his lap and ancient stones humming beneath them and the sky healing itself overhead. She kissed him back. It tasted like the end of a journey and the beginning of another one, and it lasted exactly as long as it needed to. When they pulled apart, Pikachu opened one eye, assessed the situation, closed it again, and went back to sleep with an air of profound satisfaction. Your Pikachu is judging us, Cynthia said. He's been judging me since the day we met. He approves. Trust me. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, and he put his arm around her. The sunset deepened. The stars came out, proper stars, fixed and familiar, in exactly the right positions. Somewhere behind them, Leon was loudly pretending not to have seen anything. Stephen was very interested in a rock formation. Lance had his back turned with suspicious deliberateness. Diantha was openly watching and not even slightly sorry about it. We still have to deal with Cross, Cynthia murmured. Tomorrow. And the League restructuring. Tomorrow. And the Pillars operatives. And the seal repairs. And the formal recognition of the Covenant under international law. All tomorrow. You can't just, tomorrow, everything. Watch me. I just saved the world. I'm taking the evening off. She laughed against his shoulder. Fair enough. They sat. The mountain settled. The world, battered and cracked and healing, turned toward night. The next 2 weeks were a controlled storm of a different kind. Cross capitulated. Not because he wanted to, the man had the emotional flexibility of a steel beam, but because the global broadcast of 5 champions defending reality at the Spear Pillar made opposition politically suicidal. The footage was everywhere, Leon's Charizard blazing across the sky, Stephen's Metagross shattering the Unmaker, Ash and Cynthia standing in the center of a Covenant resonance that had calmed 3 gods. Every pundit, every commentator, every person with a screen and an opinion had seen it. Cross held a press conference of his own. He praised the champions' heroic efforts. He acknowledged the Covenant's validity under Sinnoh cultural law and recommended its formal recognition by the international governing body. He committed League resources to the Seal Repair Project and the ongoing Dimensional Stability Program. He did all of this with a smile that didn't reach his eyes and a tone that suggested he was being gracious rather than capitulating. Classic Cross. But it didn't matter. The result was the result. He'll be back, Cynthia said, watching the press conference on her phone from the Celestic Pokemon Center where they were both recovering. He's retreating, not surrendering. He'll spend the next year quietly rebuilding his position. And we'll deal with it then. Ash was horizontal on a couch, Pikachu on his chest, both of them radiating the specific contentment of creatures who'd pushed themselves to their limits and were now aggressively doing nothing. One crisis at a time. That's not how politics works. It's how I work. She looked at him, sprawled on the couch, hat askew, grinning up at her, and felt the Covenant's resonance warm in her chest. Not overwhelming, not intrusive. Just present. A constant, gentle awareness of him, his heartbeat, his emotional state, his proximity. Like having a second compass, one that always pointed toward home. You're infuriating, she said. You love me. Irrelevant. Completely relevant. Most relevant thing in the world. She threw a pillow at him. He caught it, because his reflexes were ridiculous, and added it to his nest. The champions convened a formal summit in Jubilife City 3 days after the pillar. All 8 masters, 8 competitors, plus Iris, Dawn, and Brock, who'd earned their seats at the table, sat around a conference table and hammered out a framework for what came next. The SEAL network needed permanent stewardship. The champions agreed to establish a rotating guardianship. Each region's champion or their designated representative would oversee a section of the network, with shared monitoring and rapid response protocols for future disturbances. The Pillar's operatives were remanded to Sinnoh's justice system, with the exception of the 3 that Tobias had turned during the crisis. Those 3 were offered conditional amnesty in exchange for their technical knowledge about the red chain modifications, information that would be critical for understanding and countering similar technology in the future. Tobias himself appeared at the summit. He walked into the conference room unannounced, without escort, and sat in an empty chair with the calm of someone who'd already accepted whatever came next. "I'm here to answer for what I did," he said. "The SEAL sabotage. The Covenant manipulation. All of it. I'll cooperate fully with any investigation." "You also provided critical intelligence that saved lives," Lance said. "That counts for something. It counts for something. It doesn't erase what came before." The room weighed his words. Ash spoke. "Tobias. I'm not going to pretend what you did was okay. You helped break the seals. You helped create the crisis. People could have died, a lot of people. I know. But you also made a choice. When you saw the truth, that the creation trio weren't what Aldrich told you they were, you changed course. You risked your life to help us. And you turned 3 of your own people in the process." Ash leaned forward. "I think the measure of a person isn't whether they make mistakes. It's what they do when they realize they've made one." Tobias looked at him for a long time. The ice-blue eyes, usually so controlled, held something raw. "You fight like someone who's never considered losing," he said. The same words from their phone call, but different now. Not an observation. An acknowledgement. "I don't know if that's courage or insanity." Ash grinned. "Why not both?" The faintest shadow of a smile crossed Tobias's face. "Both it is." Tobias accepted probation under Sinnoh's jurisdiction, with the condition that he contribute his expertise to the SEAL restoration project. It wasn't forgiveness, it was a chance. What he did with it would be up to him. The Masters 8 tournament resumed. Cross, as part of his strategic retreat, lifted the suspension and scheduled the final match for 2 weeks after the Pillar crisis. The world was hungry for it. After the existential terror of dimensional collapse, people wanted something normal, something celebratory, something that reminded them that the world was still turning. Ash versus Leon. The final. Ash trained with a focus that bordered on obsessive. Not because he was anxious, because this was what he did. This was who he was, before the Covenant and the politics and the divine interventions. A trainer. A competitor. Someone who loved battling with every fiber of his being. Cynthia helped. Not by training his Pokémon, that was his domain, but by analyzing Leon's patterns, identifying tendencies, running theoretical matchups. She was, Ash discovered, an absolutely terrifying strategic analyst when she wasn't carrying the weight of a collapsing world on her shoulders. "Leon overcommits to Gigantamax Charizard in high-pressure situations," she said, 3 days before the match, sitting across from him at Carolina's kitchen table with charts and footage spread between them. "It's his trump card, and he trusts it absolutely. That trust is his strength and his weakness. Because if Charizard goes down, he has to improvise. And you are better at improvising than anyone alive." Was that a compliment? It was an analysis. Sounded like a compliment. Interpret it however you like. I like compliments. I know. It's one of your less annoying qualities. The final was held in Winden Stadium. Full capacity. Global broadcast. Every seat filled, every screen tuned in, every person who'd watched the world nearly end now watching 2 trainers compete for the highest title in competitive battling. Ash stood in the trainer's box and looked across the field at Leon. The monarch. The unbeatable champion. The man who'd flown across the world to fight at the spear pillar because a champion doesn't sit out the end of the world. Leon grinned at him. Not the poster grin, not the camera grin, the real one. The one that said this is what we live for. Ash grinned back. The battle lasted 47 minutes. It was, by universal consensus, the greatest Pokemon battle ever fought. Not because of raw power, though there was plenty of that, but because of the artistry. Two trainers at the absolute peak of their abilities, reading each other, adapting, innovating, pushing their Pokemon to heights that shouldn't have been possible. Leon's Charizard fell to Pikachu's Thunderbolt in the final exchange, a moment so perfectly executed that the stadium went silent for a full 3 seconds before the noise hit. When it did, it was the loudest sound Ash had ever heard, and he'd heard God scream. He was the monarch. The ceremony was everything the first one should have been, uncomplicated, joyous, pure celebration. Leon placed the championship mantle on Ash's shoulders with genuine warmth and zero bitterness, because Leon was, at his core, a man who loved battling more than winning. "Take care of it," Leon said, clasping Ash's hand. "Not that you need me to tell you that." "Thanks, Leon. For everything. Go enjoy your evening, Monarch." Leon's eyes flicked to where Cynthia stood at the edge of the field, watching with an expression that combined pride and something more personal. "I think someone's waiting for you." Ash crossed the field. The cameras followed him, and the broadcast showed every step, the new monarch walking toward the Sinnoh champion, confetti falling around him, the stadium still roaring. He reached her. She looked at him, and the composed expression she wore for cameras dissolved into something real and warm and entirely theirs. "Hi," he said. "Hi yourself, Monarch. Weird title. You'll grow into it. Will you help? I think the Covenant rather obligates me to." "Is that the only reason?" She smiled. "The best one. The one he'd been cataloging since Winden, the one that made everything else, titles, tournaments, dimensional crises, feel like background noise." "No," she said. "It's not the only reason." He took her hand. In front of 90,000 people and a global audience. In front of cameras and reporters and officials and every person who doubted or questioned or opposed them. The stadium erupted again. Not at the championship victory, at the sight of two people who'd saved the world and found each other in the process, standing together in a storm of confetti, holding on. They left the stadium together. Not through tunnels or service exits, through the front entrance, hand in hand, Pikachu on Ash's shoulder, into the Winden evening. The city was celebrating. Fireworks over the river. Music from every pub and restaurant. People cheering from windows. The world, reminded of what it nearly lost, was aggressively, joyfully alive. They walked. No destination. No schedule. Just two people moving through a city that was celebrating their existence, and the simple, extraordinary experience of being together without a crisis demanding their attention. "What now?" Cynthia asked. Ash considered. The Covenant hummed between them, a permanent, gentle presence, connecting them at a level deeper than words. He felt her curiosity, her contentment, the faint residual exhaustion that neither of them had fully shaken. "Dinner," he said. "I'm starving." "You're always starving." "And then, I don't know. Everything. There's a whole world out there, and I haven't seen nearly enough of it." "You've been to every region on the planet." "Yeah, but I haven't been to them with you." She stopped walking. He stopped with her, turning to face her on a bridge over the Winden River, fireworks painting the sky in blues and golds, the water reflecting a city that was very much alive and very much worth saving. "That," she said, "is the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. I told you. I have my moments." "You do." She kissed him. On a bridge, under fireworks, with Pikachu making a show of covering his eyes. When they pulled apart, the city cheered, whether for them or the fireworks, it didn't matter. It was all the same celebration. Ash looked at the woman beside him. The champion of Sinnoh. His partner, in every sense of the word. His wife, by a bond older than the League and stronger than anything a bureaucrat could challenge. Ready? He asked. For what? Whatever's next. She laced her fingers through his. The Covenant hummed. Pikachu yawned on his shoulder. Somewhere far away, in a dimension between dimensions, a broken man slept peacefully for the first time in centuries. And above them, unseen but felt, 3 gods watched the world they'd saved together, not as prisoners, not as jailers, but as guardians who'd finally been asked instead of ordered. Cynthia squeezed his hand. Ready, she said. They walked on, into the night, into whatever came next. Together. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.